Hi, if you want to watch exclusive content with hot girls that you won't watch on YouTube, namely where Naruto roasts Kushina and Mikoto and many other hot girls without restrictions, then visit my Boosty channel at the link in the description. After those bloody events at the Uchiha estate, he could not sleep peacefully. Moments of that fateful night haunted him endlessly, each time painting his memories crimson. How much time had passed? He did not know. He only knew that soon all this would end. Finally, the foolish younger brother had grown up. Now he would be able to avenge the once powerful and warlike Uchiha clan by killing the one responsible for countless deaths and the extinction of his own kind. Sasuke was destined to kill Itachi Uchiha from an early age. Itachi was not used to living in illusions, no matter how ironic it may sound. He understood perfectly well that from the moment he took responsibility for the decision to destroy his clan with his own hands, his life acquired a completely different meaning. He had to live. Live as a missing nin who destroyed his clan in the name of bloodlust, strength, and soon found his death at the hands of his younger brother, the only one who survived at his whim. This is how Itachi Uchiha and his deeds on this earth should remain in people's memories. His life was over back then. Now he can only follow a clearly thought-out plan and try not to drown in his own lies. But as we know, fate often has discrepancies with our plans. Yes, a forced acquaintance with a talented pink-haired medic will change everything. More precisely, it will radically adjust the plans of both. She always reproached herself for helplessness and weakness, looking at her teammates. The kunoichi realized that she was behind her friends in almost everything, except perhaps for control over chakra. In this she had no equal. Sometimes she wanted to scream from her uselessness. But that wouldn't change anything, would it? Sasuke's expected departure from the village served as the very impetus for her, after which the girl firmly decided to become stronger, no matter what she had to go through. And it must be said, she achieved her goal. At 16, Sakura Haruno was already a qualified medic, day after day improving her skills under the strict guidance of her teacher, the fifth, and her punching power. This power made not only Naruto tremble, increasingly motivating him to think before opening his mouth in Sakura's presence, but also many enemy shinobi. She definitely became stronger. Yes, now she was not a helpless little girl. Yes, now she herself could save people's lives. But for Sakura, nothing had changed. Sasuke was still far from her, and because of this, the oppressive emptiness in her soul grew more and more, not allowing her to truly enjoy life. Most of all, she wanted her beloved to finally return, pay attention to her and, perhaps, connect his future fate with her. Sakura would try to be better than others in everything. For his sake. How many times had she replayed in her head the long-awaited scenes of confession, the dear moments of their family life? But time passed, and everything remained unchanged. The hospital, missions, rare gatherings with friends. Several years had passed, and her dreams remained dreams, having no outlet. Hey, Sakura-chan, maybe that's enough? The blonde increasingly casts a worried glance at her, but the pink-haired girl constantly evades answers. What are you talking about, Naruto? Everything is fine. The girl looks at him sideways, depicting a semblance of a smile on her face. Sakura-chan, you've never been good at lying. Probably if it weren't for Naruto, Sakura would have completely retreated into herself and her illusory dreams. He seemed to be the only one who saw what was happening to his friend and why. He spurred her fading interest in life, drove away unnecessary thoughts about Sasuke for a while. But all this had a short-lived effect. She lived with hopes and dreams of a soon happy future with the younger Uchiha. However, with each passing day she became more and more convinced that these were only her girlish dreams and they would never come true, no matter how much the pink-haired girl wanted them to. These thoughts became even more painful. But all the pain disappeared when fate, by chance, pushed her into darkness, connecting her with a complete stranger in a common cause, forcing her to realize how insignificant her mental anguish was in comparison to his life of sacrifice. Night acquaintance Hey, big-headed one, don't stay up too late, you already have huge bags under your eyes. Yamanaka demonstratively pulled down the lower eyelid on her left eye, not forgetting to stick out her tongue. My affairs and my appearance are none of your business, pig. Sakura was starting to boil again. Damn, how annoying! Go already, before I ask Tsunade-sama for an assistant in sorting through all this pile of unnecessary old medical papers. I think you'll do. Don't worry, pig, the two of us can definitely handle it overnight. Haruno grinned so terribly that Yamanaka swallowed nervously and shuffled towards the door. I can't even joke anymore, can I? I didn't intend to deprive you of the joy of being left alone with the waste paper. Ino once again cast a dismissive glance at the pink-haired medic's desk littered with papers. Besides, did I volunteer to clean all this up of my own free will? Ino's gaze now stopped on the clock, and she involuntarily cried out. Damn, I'm late. My whole life is falling apart again because of your problems, big-headed one. Ino theatrically pressed her hands to her chest. Haruno only sighed tiredly at this. Again, trying to, accidentally, run into Sai. Do I understand the whole reason for this tragedy correctly? Sakura looked at her friend with a skeptical look, while putting another piece of paper in one of the stacks of documents. What if it is? At least I have some chance in my personal life. I don't sit in the hospital for days like some people and wait for God knows what. The blonde stopped at the last words, looking guiltily at her friend and cursing her long tongue for the 100th time. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. It's okay, everything's fine. Sakura smiled tensely and immediately looked down at the papers that she was already sick of. Well, I really should go. Ino hesitated for a second, as if she wanted to add something else, but after a few moments the kunoichi disappeared through the doorway, leaving Sakura in complete oppressive silence, interrupted only by the occasional crackling light bulb on the ceiling, with a mountain of work to do. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The room was unbearably stuffy. Sakura leaned back in her chair, thinking about how she had rushed with her zeal for an extra night shift. Damn, I guess I really went too far this time with my self-nomination as a volunteer to clean up yet another routine. And who pulled my tongue? Haruno tiredly rubbed her eyes, staring blankly at the endless pile of papers that hadn't yet been sorted. The girl rolled her eyes in irritation. She was suddenly overcome by such a desire to smash everything to hell and never show up in this office again, to forget about the useless fuss with papers and do more useful things. Or even just go home and forget herself in a deep sleep. However, yes, as the kunoichi herself noted for herself, closely examining herself in the mirror after her best friend left, a good night's sleep wouldn't hurt her. Okay, I'll sort out the last folder and go home. The kunoichi decided to herself and got to work. But not even a few minutes had passed before something made the pink-haired girl tense up and cautiously glance at the closed window. And again she saw someone's dark silhouette, hidden in the foliage of the trees. Everything was just as quiet. Oh my god, I'm definitely going to start hallucinating soon due to lack of sleep. Sakura slapped her forehead and closed her eyes. And here it was again. She literally felt the burning gaze, forcing her to clench her fists until her knuckles turned white. But not from fear, no, but rather from silent irritation. No, something is definitely wrong here. I had the same feeling yesterday. I need to take a few days off immediately. After a few moments, she slowly but surely laid her head down on the pile of papers and fell into a deep sleep. Waking up, Sakura opened her eyelids with difficulty and realized that it would soon be light outside. The girl slowly stood up, stretching, and went to the window to let some much-needed fresh air into the room. Turning back to the desk, the pink-haired girl involuntarily gasped. A young man sat opposite her, studying the kunoichi with an imperturbable gaze. You were sleeping too peacefully, I didn't dare wake you, the stranger said in an indifferent tone, as if this whole situation was an ordinary matter for him. Sakura, for the first time in her life, probably didn't know how to react. And the stranger continued to stare at her, as if trying to figure out what emotions were more on Sakura's face, shock, fear or indignation. Who are you? And what do you want here? The kunoichi finally found herself. Her brain began to work hard, and her body was ready at any moment for an attack from the stranger. She did not expect to see a visitor here at such an hour, and what can I say? Her heart almost sank into her heels when her still sleepy eyes focused on a strange young guy dressed in ordinary civilian clothes. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I need a medic's help. Your help. Isn't it a bit early to see a doctor? The girl noted sarcastically. And yes, you didn't answer my first question. It seems he really is telling the truth. If he wanted to kill me, I would already be dead. But Kami-sama, what does he want? I think, on the contrary, it's high time. A velvety voice sounded. The stranger slowly stood up, still not taking his eyes off the kunoichi, who at that moment had already tensed her entire body, waiting for what he would do. I will have enough time to explain, and now help me, Sakura-san. Dark eyes sank into the darkness of the night forest. But this did not stop Itachi from silently and unhinderedly covering the path to his once native village. He was in a hurry. His goal was very close. Perhaps this was the second time he was able to experience the feeling of absolute helplessness in the face of harsh reality. He had made a cruel miscalculation. More precisely, life had put a new obstacle on the way to fulfilling his duty. A few months ago, he had suspected that he had a strange ailment, which soon began to progress very quickly into frequent attacks, sometimes accompanied by a ragged cough with blood clots. Although the renegade shinobi was not a doctor, he understood perfectly well how serious his illness was. More and more often, Itachi was haunted by the gloomy thought that he simply might not make it to the fateful battle with his brother on his own. But this thought was immediately dismissed. He couldn't just leave this world without finishing his mission. It was impossible. He couldn't leave Sasuke like this. Something had to be done immediately. It took Itachi a little time spent searching and studying his newfound illness to come to a very disappointing conclusion. There is no cure for his illness, it is incurable. But it shouldn't end like this, it's too stupid. This thought often visited Itachi after another attack, which caused a barely noticeable bitter smile to appear on the lips of the elder Uchiha, in which even the most perceptive person would not be able to discern all that inner spiritual impotence before the weakness of his own body, which slowly absorbed and killed the missing nin. He felt it. But still, Itachi was not going to surrender himself to the clutches of death so easily and quickly. He was an Uchiha after all. First, he needed to find a person who could delay his death for the necessary time. And this step turned out to be the most difficult. His searches in each village were fruitless, but he postponed his visit to Konoha until the last minute. However, the deeper Itachi delved into his search, the more he realized that only Tsunade Senju, the unrivaled medic of the Hidden Leaf village, could help him. But this was ridiculous. Asking the Hokage himself for help as a missing nin was the most reckless idea that could only come to the mind of a madman who had decided to commit suicide. However, Itachi settled on this option. But not quite. The Hokage's student, Haruno Sakura, would help him. I don't understand anything. Damn, I don't even have a clue who I'm talking to. Sakura continued to stand near the table, clenching her fists. Thousands of questions were flashing through her head, but the most important one was why her? Yes, why she, in addition to constantly having to deal with the consequences of Naruto's eccentricities, now managed to get herself into an equally strange story with a suspicious guy. Then a familiar chilling voice reached her ears. Isamu. What? Sakura stared at the young man standing a few steps away from her in bewilderment. She couldn't think straight anymore. The night visit of this suspicious guy, some kind of request. Now she had no doubt that her hallucinations about the presence of a constant invisible observer were not delirium. It was definitely him. My name is Isamu. Your name, as you might have already understood, is known to me. And now I will try to briefly convey to you what is necessary, the brunette said ingratiatingly, not breaking eye contact with the girl for a moment, and making it clear that she would have to listen to him to the end in any case. I am seriously ill, and I need to get medicine as soon as possible. It was not difficult for the guy to determine the girl's reaction to his words. She was finally beginning to understand for what purpose he had visited her. I spent too long looking for someone who could develop it, and now I am completely sure that I made the right choice. At that moment, it was difficult to describe the girl's state. It seemed to the kunoichi that this was no longer reality. Her thoughts were blurry. She had completely lost her bearings in the situation. What is he even talking about? What treatment? So, we need to sort this out as quickly as possible, Sakura. Seriously? I can't treat anyone without informing Tsunade-sama. Isamu-san. In order to avoid wasting time and making me paranoid with your surveillance and nighttime visits, please contact her yourself. Only then will I be able to do something. That's my final answer. No, that's too suspicious. If he's not a spy or a criminal, and if he really needs help, then why is this guy showing up at night for this? The girl once again cast a searching glance at the young man standing a few steps away from her. His apathetic expression made the kunoichi wary. Besides, Sakura added, frowning slightly, you shouldn't trust someone who shows up at a hospital in the middle of the night, right? Go away. And this time, not through the window. Her words did not have the desired effect. The night visitor did not move from his place, but instead suddenly appeared right in front of Haruno, forcefully pressing her against the wall. The girl did not have time to react in time, and now her body seemed to go numb under the gaze of piercing black eyes directed at her. What the hell, it seems like some kind of genjutsu. In an instant, the kunoichi was enveloped in anger. Anger at herself and her helplessness. What are you going to do now? Weakling. Well, I couldn't expect anything else. The guy said, looking as if through Sakura. But I can't just leave. These were the last words that Sakura could discern through the stream of incoherent thoughts that instantly filled her mind. After that, the girl remembered only the sparkling scarlet eyes. It can't be. I can't move. This was the first thing that her awakened consciousness conveyed to her. The girl with difficulty opened her sleepy eyes and assumed a half-sitting position, casting an empty glance around her own room. It was still completely dark, but the clock already showed 6:45 in the morning, which meant that she needed to get ready for the hospital again, but still Sakura was in no hurry to get out of bed. That weird dream again. That Isamu again. Those eyes again, just like... No, what am I thinking about, idiot? The image of Sasuke had just involuntarily come to mind. The girl just pursed her lips and leaned back easily on the pillows. I definitely need to get examined. The kunoichi was already starting to be quite worried about these dreams, which ended the same way every time, as if a jammed film with some gloomy movie with her in the lead role was playing in her brain. But as for the second hero of her dreams, everything was very vague. No matter how hard Haruno tried, she could not even roughly remember what that guy looked like. Only his name was clearly fixed in her memory. Isamu. True, it is worth admitting that she had this strange dream only a couple of times, and it could all be written off as a normal consequence of lack of sleep or stress. But there was something in this one dream that greatly disturbed the girl's consciousness. The story always ended in the same place, without having a continuation. And this is what interested Sakura. Itachi deliberately hesitated. It had been a week since he had attempted to contact Haruno. Everything had gone as planned. The girl had refused. He had used genjutsu. However, everything had gone according to plan with one significant caveat. As it turned out later, developing a cure was impossible with a clouded mind immersed in genjutsu. The girl was simply unable to independently perform complex analytical thought operations. A clear mind was required here. Well, this was what Uchiha had feared, so he had immediately predicted such an outcome. After Itachi realized that the 5th Hokage's student needed to be involved in developing the cure, he had several options. The first was so banal and essentially simply unfeasible that Uchiha immediately discarded it: kidnapping Sakura Haruno. Kidnapping a girl from the village is not that difficult. The main problems would come later. Itachi was well enough informed about the medic's identity to know her not only as a student of the Hokage himself, but also as a close friend of the nine-tailed Jinchuriki. Her disappearance would be quickly discovered and an active search would begin, and even Itachi would have a hard time finding such a secluded place where the Konoha people would not get to and where it would be possible to hold the medic need for as long as it would take to develop the necessary drug. He had already fully tested the next option for inconsistency during a night meeting with the kunoichi in the hospital. The last option remained: the girl herself must agree to help him. And Itachi already knew in advance how to knock out her consent. Yes, Isamu will once again be resurrected from the memory of the former Umbu captain. Commentary on coming out into the light. The theme of Isamu will be revealed in the next chapter, but I warn you right away, a little author's fiction. Awakening. Part 1 Sakura-chan, you look even worse than usual. Did something happen? The blonde looked at his friend with concern, and immediately felt the pink-haired girl's destructive aura around him. A slight chill ran down the fearless shinobi's spine. What did you just say, Baka? Repeat what I look like. The whole street probably heard them. But the residents of Konoha are no strangers to seeing such scenes between two best friends. Although many, due to their rather mature age, secretly began to think that there was something more between them. Unfortunately for Naruto, they were very wrong. Huh! Naruto scratched the back of his head in confusion, and then a revelation came to him. And as always, too late. Sakura-chan, that's not what I meant, you know that. I know. The kunoichi breathed out hoarsely. That's why I didn't kill him on the spot. And what an idiot you are, Naruto! Saying something like that to a girl. Especially to me. The girl looked angrily at Uzumaki, causing him to subconsciously shrink in anticipation of a strong blow. But Sakura only gave her friend a light slap on the back of the head and said in a warning tone. Next time, if you blurt out something like that, I won't be so lenient, got it? Well, who else but Naruto knows that it is dangerous to anger Sakura? For the sake of one's own health, one should not. He was convinced of this more than once. But the guy never stopped unconsciously irritating Sakura with his thoughtless words, and often purely childish actions. No, he will never learn to think before he speaks. And what should I do with him? Sometimes I want not just to shake all the nonsense out of him, but to strangle him. But now, he is really worried about me. And I can't tell him anything. I hate lying to him. The girl tried not to meet Naruto's gaze, because the slightest suspicion on his part of something wrong, and the shinobi would not leave her alone. Yes, he always saw right through her. And they both knew it. It was even more frightening for Sakura. They had been walking for quite a while now, without saying another word. Sakura had a lot to think about. But Naruto was used to going straight ahead. He came very close to the girl and barely perceptibly grabbing her hand, looked into her emerald eyes, wide open in surprise. He was looking for answers. You haven't been yourself for a week now. You fall asleep on the go. Granny Tsunade even removed you from our joint mission in the land of water. Tell me what's going on with you. I'm your friend. I want to know after all. Naruto took a breath for a moment. Now he was overwhelmed with emotions. He always tried to help Sakura-chan, but she was not always in a hurry to tell him about what was gnawing at her heart. She kept everything to herself. And this left a heavy residue in the soul of the Jinchuriki. Sakura remained silent, pursing her lips. As always. I see. The blonde said through clenched teeth. See you again, Sakura-chan. Yes, it hurt him. How could he call himself her friend if Sakura-chan never really opened up to him? I just want to help. Does she understand this? Yes. But does she need my help? Naruto, wait! Sakura tried to hold back the blonde, who had already quickened his pace, but it was too late. Naruto had already disappeared into the crowd. The girl only looked away with a gloomy gaze at the sun that was already setting over the horizon. She still needed to have time to buy the necessary herbs. I'm a terrible friend. He always tried to protect me, to understand me, but even now I push Naruto away. And why is everything so complicated? Flashback. The rain was pouring down on the entire village that day. It hadn't happened for a long time. Sakura looked thoughtfully out the window, leaning her hands on the windowsill. It will get dark earlier than usual today. The girl mindlessly moved her hands around the glass. How tired she was of it all. As a child, she couldn't even imagine how her life as a shinobi would be, routine, colorless. No, she had already come to terms with this dull regularity. The kunoichi had even accepted the fact that Sasuke would most likely never return to the village. To her, Sakura didn't care anymore. Kami-sama, I can't do this anymore. Barely distinguishable, measured steps were suddenly heard behind the door. One careful knock broke the silence that had temporarily engulfed the girl. The rain seemed to begin to pound even harder. Can I come in? Asked a male voice. Yes, of course, come in. The pink-haired girl answered automatically and, without much interest, directed her gaze at the opening door. Judging by the appearance, the one who entered was one of the Anbu. Quite strange. It was puzzling. Hello, Sakura-san, said the masked guy. I came here on Danzo's orders. Noticing how Sakura had become noticeably nervous, he didn't fail to add. Exclusively as your patient, don't worry. The man from Root, my patient? I was not given any instructions on this matter. The kunoichi was clearly at a loss. Could she really have missed such important information? No, that was impossible. But what worried Sakura even more was the shinobi's voice. She had heard it somewhere before, there was no doubt about it. I understand that you are surprised, the guy said calmly. You couldn't have known about my visit today. Only Danzo knows about this. What? But why isn't Tsunade-sama aware of this? The girl looked at the shinobi warily. She was waiting for an answer. May I sit down? Permission was not required. We answer only to Lord Danzo. No one else should know about our actions within the organization. Do you understand? The girl nodded weakly. Sakura-san, now answer yourself one question. How many patients have you had that belong to Root or Umbu? The kunoichi looked down. Not a single one. Despite the fact that she was considered one of Konoha's best medics. And the girl didn't even know how many hundreds of sick and wounded shinobi she had already gotten back on their feet. But what was he getting at? The guy watched her reaction carefully. As expected. You see. Frankly, all this is because we rarely use the services of doctors. Members of Umbu and Root prefer death by enemy kunai. It has always been that way. I would not have come here if it were not absolutely necessary. Sakura didn't like what he was saying. She didn't want to believe that there was such a side to the shinobi life. A side covered in the darkness of death. Even if it was for the interests of the village. No, the kunoichi knew very well before what organizations like Umbu and Root were. But she had never really thought about what it was like to give up everything in her life for secret missions. She didn't understand what motivated these people. And now, looking at her interlocutor, she couldn't find an answer either. I need to complete my final mission, the shinobi continued in a steely voice. But in the state I'm in now, it's impossible. I know that I'll die before I successfully complete the mission. I need a medic's help. The shinobi seemed not to be looking at the girl, he was just waiting for what she would say. However, looking into her eyes for a moment, he saw what he wanted so much. She believed his words. I'll try to do everything that depends on me. Yes, Sakura made a decision. And now tell me your name, please, I need to address you somehow. Call me Isamu. Sakura's insides turned upside down. No, it's just a coincidence. It can't be. However, the girl still narrowed her eyes suspiciously. It's a stupid question, of course. The kunoichi hesitated for a second, which didn't escape the shinobi's notice. But Isamu-san, tell me, could I have met you somewhere before? If the guy's face weren't hidden by a mask, Sakura would have noticed a faint smile. I think so. On one of the missions, it is quite possible. We can often disguise ourselves as civilians if the mission requires it. Well, I see. The girl sighed with relief. Although the dark thoughts still didn't want to leave the kunoichi's mind so easily. I think we can conduct a primary examination right now. As you say. The girl had already stood up from her seat, when her new patient continued just as calmly. And most importantly, Sakura-san. You understand, I hope, that everything related to the Root always remains a secret? I don't think I need to tell you what is required of you. I understood. The girl had just finished all the tests. She was pretty tired, because the patient's examination took at least 3 hours. All that was left was to wait for the necessary results. But it seemed that Sakura could already give a definite answer about her patient's illness. The girl's gloomy face spoke for itself now. She knew what kind of illness it was. I can't help you, Isamu-san. Flashback. Continued. Why do you think so? The young man's chilling voice rang out a few minutes later, breaking the silent tension. Sakura went cold. She tried in vain to discern anything in the shinobi's voice, fear, disappointment, anger, or at worst, disbelief. Nothing. He kept looking at her. Even though the kunoichi was standing with her back to him, she could feel his burning gaze on her. She didn't have the strength to turn around. The girl hated admitting her helplessness, let alone showing her weakness in front of others. However, today everything was much worse. She was not only proving to herself once again that she was helpless, but also bringing another person to the brink of death with her helplessness. I hate it! Something needs to be said. but the words just don't want to fly from frozen lips. Speak! The shinobi looked expectantly at the girl again. My intuition has never let me down. She must say what she knows. Why are you silent, Sakura? The girl seemed to read his thoughts. She exhaled loudly and turned to the guy. I know what kind of disease it is. The girl's face changed dramatically. There was no longer a shadow of fear or guilt on it. A hard, empty look indicated that she was reliving some moments from the past. The girl turned her gaze to the countless flasks standing on the table. It was too difficult to look at a patient who was possibly doomed. I can tell you more. I saw how people died because of it, writhing in their death throes. Back then, I was just an assistant, a nurse on assignment in one of the small villages. There were 2 of those who caught this nasty thing. At that time, absolutely nothing was known about this disease, but even then I suspected that infection occurred through blood. Because I was a simple assistant, I was not allowed to conduct research, but I had to be with the sick much more often than the doctors themselves. Isamu-san, the lives of these people turned into hell in a few days. Sakura cried out in pain, immediately feeling moisture on her cheeks. No one could do anything. They were given a poison pill. They begged for it. The kunoichi could no longer hold back her sobs. Images of those terrible days in the village hospital continued to flash before her eyes. Her entire body was shaking convulsively. A little more and she would start to have hysterics. One warm touch of his thin fingers on her trembling hands. A noisy sigh. A heavy sob. She doesn't take her hands away. One strong hug. She is not afraid of him. She just presses herself tighter. This is the only way to get rid of the fear of the past now. No explanations are needed. Even breathing, but at the same time, the heartbeat accelerated. Itachi feels that Sakura is slowly coming to her senses. The trembling gradually subsides. She's fine. The shinobi slowly moves away. Sakura can't raise her eyes, reddened from recent tears, to him. She only says quietly, "Thank you? I'm glad you've come to your senses." The guy glanced at her downcast face once more to make sure of it. We can't get rid of the past, but you shouldn't cling to it so much, Sakura-san. It kills any person. Oh, he knew what he was talking about. Well, as for this illness, everything is clear to me. Thank you for your time, Sakura-san. I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye. Wait. The girl's eyes lit up, and she looked at the shinobi with unshakable confidence. You still have time. I know it may sound stupid, but I believe that a cure can be developed. I'll ask Tsunade-sama. What is your faith based on? The guy interrupted. What? Sakura was confused by such a sudden question. I will answer for you. Your faith is based on the desire to help me. But understand, it will not help in any way with the development of a cure. Now you are only giving false hope to your terminally ill patient. It's not true. The girl herself did not notice how she started screaming. The words of this shinobi hurt her deeply. But what was even worse was that she could not oppose his words. She really had nothing but faith. But for Sakura, this was enough. She was more serious than ever. Isamu-san, I swear that I will develop a cure for you, no matter what it costs me. You will not die, understand? I didn't think our doctors were so selfless. Yes, this girl's stubbornness involuntarily made him smile. Okay. I'll come to you in 3 days. The kunoichi turned away without answering. They both knew that time was short. This was one big risk. But still, this shinobi had no choice but to trust her, right? Suddenly she felt a light breath of fresh wind. The girl turned her head towards the window. It was opened, and there was no need to guess who did it. Sakura didn't even notice how the rain stopped. Yes, indeed, Itachi Uchiha no longer had any choice but to trust this pink-haired medic, who, judging by her expression when they talked in the lab, already firmly believed in the success of her work to find a cure. 2 days had already passed, and he still could not forget that look. At that moment, he looked at her and saw a child in front of him. A child who still believed that every fairy tale should have a happy ending. Itachi then involuntarily wondered, "And why is there so much confidence in your eyes now? You, like no one else, see people suffering every day, so you must know that not everything always happens the way we want it to. You must have never even doubted that you would be able to help everyone someday." Nothing can be worse than unjustified faith, Sakura. I don't share your beliefs, but I respect them. I know that I have never been wrong in my perceptions of reality before. On the contrary, it is you who lives in illusions. But this time I want to be proven wrong. You have your blind faith to prove it to me, Sakura. The girl sat motionless, staring blankly at one point. She had screwed up again. It had been 2 days since the Shinobi's visit, and Sakura hadn't made any progress in her research. The kunoichi had worked too hard to find any medical records related to that disease in the little-known village. And to no avail. Sakura hadn't managed to find even the tiniest bit of information that even mentioned that disease. Haruno really didn't understand anything. She had access to all the research of Konoha's doctors, but what she was looking for seemed to have evaporated. It was all just her nightmare, nothing more. But no, it wasn't. And it was this fact that scared and confused her at the same time. After all, this data couldn't have just disappeared, even if it had been several years ago. Haruno's first thought was to go to her teacher and try to figure out the problem of the missing documents. However, already on the way to the Hokage's residence, the kunoichi realized with horror what a mistake she was about to make. Too many questions would arise. Why was she showing such an increased interest in this topic? Where did the primary data come from? Haruno knew that in this case, sooner or later she would have to tell everything related to the Shinobi. But Sakura could not do this. She made a promise. She had given that shinobi her word to remain silent. And Sakura knew perfectly well why it was so important. In Ambu, as in Root, members of the organization always kept everything strictly secret, even under threat of death. One of them had come to her. And Sakura had to keep her word in her own interests. Although who was she kidding? She wasn't afraid of being killed by a member of her village's secret police. If it was absolutely necessary, she even considered telling Tsunade-sama everything. Right now, the main goal was to develop a cure on her own as quickly as possible, without any prior information. A nasty business. Too difficult even for her. So she made a decision for herself. Doesn't Isamu-san understand that with this obligation he only bound my actions? I need help. I didn't think that I would immediately encounter something unsolvable. The girl closed her eyes tiredly from such thoughts, asking herself, where to start then? Her patient would not keep her waiting tomorrow, she was sure of that. And what would she tell him? Yes, you were right, I am a self-confident idiot? The corners of his lips lifted slightly, which from the outside looked like a crooked smile full of despair. He'll be right about the only thing, I'm a naive idiot. I thought I could quickly develop what I needed, but in reality, several days have passed and I still have nothing. Damn it! He'll be wrong about one thing. I'm not giving up that easily. I need to find the right solution, and my chakra won't help me here, like it usually did before. Think, Haruno. Lost in her thoughts, which revolved around only one question, the kunoichi leaned back in her chair, clasping her hands. Suddenly, the girl's eyes widened. Realization overwhelmed her in an instant. His chakra. Why didn't I think of it right away? Without thinking about anything else, the girl quickly headed towards the door. Her legs were now carrying her to the Hokage's residence. There was complete silence in the Akatsuki's new hideout. The criminal organization was currently in crisis like never before. Many of its talented members had died, and it was currently impossible to find replacements. But right now, their leader had a more pressing issue on his mind. Itachi's departure from Akatsuki was inevitable and only a matter of time. And that time seemed to have come. All that was needed was to make the final move in this final game. Itachi Kisame. You have a mission in the Leaf Village. Uchiha didn't seem surprised then, having received information about the location of the new mission. The missing nin knew that the leader had long been aware of his frequent visits to his home village. Through Zetsu, the leader was informed of almost everything, so Itachi guessed that his actions would not remain ignored and some steps would be taken. Uchiha waited. And, as it turned out, he didn't have to wait that long. This mission was finally supposed to resolve all the issues that concerned only Itachi and Akatsuki. Tsunade decided to open another bottle of sake earlier than usual today. The woman was definitely sure that there was a reason. More precisely, she only needed to think about it carefully. Of course, she had been working non-stop all day under Shizen's watchful eye. Now she could finally relax? Besides, after listening to so many reports that had no particular importance in their content, her brain needed a discharge. Immediately, the Hokage was already on the edge. Just after taking her first saving sip, the woman heard a distinct knock on the door. The Hokage indignantly glanced in the direction from which the sound was coming, and with a disappointed sigh, pushed the sake aside, shouting in a dry tone, "Come in." Sakura didn't keep herself waiting. The kunoichi pulled herself up several times on the way to the residence, considering that going to Tsunade-sama for a consultation at the end of the working day was far from the best idea. She would be lucky if she wasn't simply thrown out the door. But Haruno had nowhere to go, she had to share her guesses with Sensei. The girl confidently entered the office and stopped at the table. "Ah, Sakura. I think you, of all people, know when not to disturb me." Tsunade glanced at the sake and immediately cast an expectant glance at her student. She didn't even flinch. "Interesting. Well, I suppose you have something important to tell me? Speak and don't waste time." "Yes, of course." Sakura was momentarily at a loss in front of the Hokage's searching gaze, although it seemed that this was not the first time the girl had to endure this burning gaze that saw right through people. But she needed to pull herself together and explain everything in such a way as to avoid unnecessary questions and at the same time be able to get the necessary answers. "Tsunade-sama, tell me." Sakura looked at the teacher with a serious expression, mentally thinking about her words. "Is it possible to carry a virus, no matter what its nature, along with chakra? That is there a virus that destroys the body, having an outlet only through chakra?" "What? You mean a virus that does not exist inseparably from chakra?" The woman frowned, crossing her arms over her chest. "Theoretically, it is possible. Nowadays, viruses have a developed property of adaptability to various kinds of modifications, and the possibility of such an action cannot be ruled out. But we have not encountered this so far, so I cannot say with certainty that something like this is actually already encountered in our environment. In addition, you should understand, Sakura, if viral particles are in chakra, it is difficult to detect them even with the help of our medical ninjutsu." The girl nodded silently. The teacher had just confirmed all her main assumptions and fears. And Haruno had also learned the most important thing for herself. Tsunade-sama had no idea about that viral disease in a small village, in which one could suspect precisely this strange manifestation of viral activity. Nothing was clear. The fifth herself had sent a whole squad of trusted doctors there. Was she really not informed about those events back then? Or was there something else? Sakura began to realize how she was slowly sinking into a web of unresolved questions and mysteries. That was all she needed. "Yes, I understand. I have recently become interested in this question. I would like to conduct some research in this area, if you allow me, Tsunade-sama." The girl herself did not understand where so much confidence came from in her voice. "May I have your permission to conduct the necessary experiments in the main laboratory?" The woman looked at her student with a searching gaze. There was something she didn't like about this. Yes, Sakura had always taken the initiative in conducting various studies, but now the fifth couldn't help but notice the tension that emanated from Haruno. "This isn't just scientific interest, is it, Sakura? You already have something on this matter." However, Tsunade decided to keep her conclusions silent. Until the time came. "Well, that's how it is. You've already thought it all out. Okay, I give you the Hokage's permission. You will give the results of the research not to Shizen, but directly to me, understand?" "Yes, Tsunade-sama." "Thank you. Good luck." Now she has access to all the necessary drugs, plus an entire lab at her disposal. Sakura already had options that could bring her closer to developing a cure. The kunoichi literally jumped out of the Hokage's office, heading straight to the main laboratory of Konoha to immediately begin her first steps with conducting experiments. But Sakura didn't know yet that their conversation with Tsunade Senju had one unnoticed witness. A witness who really didn't like what he heard. Haruno Sakura clearly overestimates herself, since she decided to get involved in Akatsuki's affairs. Even if unconsciously. Something had to be done about this. Itachi was in no hurry to see his medic. To be honest, he didn't even expect to learn anything new from the kunoichi. No, Uchiha didn't doubt Haruno's professionalism, But something told him that in his case, everything was not so simple, and it was unlikely that it would be possible to obtain the necessary information in such a short period of time. In addition, after the kunoichi's emotional story about his illness, Itachi became seriously interested in the case that had occurred in the little-known village. It became even more interesting in some way when he found nothing on that case. Nothing. Not the slightest information. Remembering Haruno's state well, in which she told him everything she knew, he couldn't help but believe her. These were not her fantasies. Sakura claimed that medics worked there, mainly from Konoha. But where then were the records, reports of any kind about that outbreak of the disease? Shinobi began to suspect something, quite rightly. But one thing was for sure, if he could quickly sort out this whole unclear matter, he could get closer to solving his problem of finding a cure. This is what Itachi planned to do first. But everything turned out differently and not at all in the Uchiha's favor. First, he had to complete a secret mission to destroy a scroll belonging to Akatsuki. Only then could he exit the game, which was already starting to gain momentum. It has already become clear that the leader has already prepared everything for the implementation of his plan. Your village, huh? Kisame glanced around one of the largest villages in the shinobi world in the glow of the shining moon without much interest. Itachi didn't answer, to which Hoshigaki only smiled strangely. I suggest you obtain information about the location of the scroll. I will take upon myself the removal of it. All right, Itachi-san. I'll clear the way of witnesses at the same time. The swordsman at this moment looked like a maniac. His Samahata already sensed the smell of blood. We must not let ourselves be discovered. Unjustified killings will only attract attention. The Nuke-nin responded in an unperturbed voice. True, he thought a little differently, once again adhering to his pacifist views in such cases. We cannot allow more innocent victims. Kisame had been working with the Uchiha for many years, and so he now understood perfectly well the reason for this extreme precaution. And he was already used to it. And he had even learned to control his own bloodlust a little, because Itachi was mostly always right. Timely detection could ruin the entire mission, and today's task was too important. Kisame understood this even without much detail. He only had to look at Itachi after the conversation with the leader, which Hoshigaki, however, did not have to be present in person. What will you do while I search for the location of our scroll? The swordsman asked indifferently. I have one urgent matter. I will contact you when necessary. Itachi said the last words, dissolving into his own movement technique. The mission has begun. Itachi, meanwhile, was heading to the hospital. He had enough time to talk to the medic in order to move forward. And the shinobi knew for sure that Haruno was waiting for him. And it was hard to say what Uchiha felt inside himself when he saw broken bottles, broken furniture, and everything in the same spirit in the office instead of the young medic. It was not hard to see clear signs of a struggle in all of this. Itachi didn't need to go through the long mental operations of what and why. But he could admit to himself he really did care about the fate of this girl. After all, it's his fault. And the first thing he had to do was get Haruno out alive. And the missing Nin had a very bad feeling about that. But Itachi couldn't think otherwise. She had to be alive. This girl definitely didn't deserve to end her life like this. To become a victim of the machinations of one of the clan killer's many enemies. Itachi was determined to find her, no matter what it cost him. He had to pay for his mistakes, and not with other people's lives. If only he knew that he didn't have much time. Sakura woke up from aching pain in her wrists. With difficulty opening her eyes, she could not really see anything. Pitch darkness. In an attempt to change her body position, since she could tell from her numb limbs that she had been in this room for at least several hours, and this was definitely not good for her body, the girl was disappointed. Now she was tied hand and foot in every sense of the word. But what was most frightening in this whole incomprehensible situation was that she did not feel her chakra at all. What had they done to her? No, that was not the right way to ask the question. What had she done to be treated like this? Now the kunoichi was just trying to remember what happened earlier. She had been attacked in her own office while deducing the results of her first experiments. Damn. Most of all, Sakura now blamed herself for her mistake. She had been so carried away by the procedure that she had not been able to react quickly enough. And of course, her further attempts to resist had been ineffective. And now the girl began to think hard about what she should do now. How to save herself. Suddenly, barely audible steps were heard. A door creaked nearby. "I know you're awake." A soft male voice sounded almost above Sakura's head. She instinctively shrank. "Your chakra is currently being held back by a seal. You don't have to try anything stupid." "Who are you?" Haruno's voice finally trembled. For some reason, she felt a strong conviction that she didn't have long to live. Good question. But too obvious. Try to guess yourself, Sakura. At one point, a torch flared up next to the kunoichi. Haruno closed her eyes in displeasure, but after a few seconds, she slowly opened them and tried to focus her gaze on the person standing next to her. The realization of the unenviable situation she had found herself in instantly overwhelmed her. "Tobi from Akatsuki?" Sakura stared at the masked shinobi, dumbfounded. She had only met him once on a mission, but this strange ninja had been firmly ingrained in her mind even then. Too strange. This applied to everything, from his behavior to his use of jutsu. But now she seemed to see a completely different person, no feigned childishness, and all that a cold-blooded missing need in front of her. Sakura was confused. "I'm glad you recognized me. It will be easier this way." "What are you talking about? What do you want?" The girl flashed her eyes angrily, in which now only rage and an unwavering desire to fight this freak could be read. But in her current situation she was not thinking about it. "I don't need anything from you, you can rest assured. I just wanted to talk before you pierced your own heart." Haruno felt a chill run through her insides. Just from his voice, it was clear that this guy wasn't joking. And how could one of the Akatsuki joke about such things? This was really bad. "And what do you want to talk about?" the girl said without much interest. She had firmly decided for herself. First of all, she needed to figure out how to get out of here, and for that she needed to stall for time. Of course, she was not going to die. It was too early for Sakura. She had done too little to just leave. She couldn't help but remember the promise she had recently made to the Umbu Shinobi. She had given her word that she would heal him. She couldn't die. "We will talk about Itachi Uchiha's illness. Or if it is more convenient for you, about Isamu's illness." Flashback. In a small room, against the backdrop of dying torches, two male figures could be discerned. Even their shadows were completely motionless. Each was currently fighting his own battle. "Did you call Leader Sama?" "Yes. There is no one here, so we can do without these formalities. I am sure you can guess why I called you." "I suppose." Itachi didn't even look at his interlocutor, as if he wasn't of any particular interest to the shinobi. However, everything was just the opposite. This was one of the few people in Akatsuki that the missing nin couldn't fully understand. Uchiha Madara. That's how this man had once introduced himself to him, which immediately aroused great interest. After all, in the shinobi world, there probably wasn't anyone who hadn't heard the name Madara Uchiha. The name of the genius of the Cursed Clan, firmly established in history. It was clear to Itachi that this was not the legendary Uchiha Madara, but only the man hiding behind that name. It was enough to compare the time periods. Even the owner of Mangekyo could not control time. And the most important thing for the Uchiha would be to find out what prompted the man standing now a few steps away from him to cast a shadow of the past upon himself. To take upon himself the legacy of the great Uchiha Madara. Then I think we can do without empty talk. We both know that you can leave the organization at any time and will be completely free of obligations to Akatsuki. The shinobi in the mask deliberately made a long pause. "This was your main condition when joining us. I gave my consent myself. But now I am forced to make small changes to our agreement. Circumstances have changed." "What's the matter?" Uchiha's voice was filled with undisguised indifference. But that was only on the surface. This was the first personal meeting with Madara, after so many years since the Uchiha clan massacre. Yes, during all this time, these two shinobi had never had any contact with each other, as if nothing connected them. From the outside, that's exactly how it looked. But today, one of them was the first to throw off his mask. And this caused hidden fears and suspicions. Itachi already had a dark thought that some kind of game was being started against him. Well, if that was the case, then he had to accept the challenge. I can't let you go and deal with your little brother when a major operation is going on. Anything that concerns Sasuke shouldn't concern you." There was only steel in his voice. Probably, anyone who looked at Uchiha at that moment would have felt a chill down their spine. That hard look literally riveted them to itself, depriving the enemy of any movement. However, this did not apply to his interlocutor. Obito Uchiha himself could give anyone over to the clutches of fear and numbness. "You're right about that. I have a proposition for you. The mission that will be entrusted to you and Kisame will be your last in the ranks of Akatsuki." "What?" A weak cry echoed throughout the small room. The girl couldn't believe her ears. "What the hell is this psycho talking about? I think I made myself clear enough. But I see there's something I need to clarify before we begin our interesting conversation, Sakura." The shinobi didn't move from his place, and seemed to be staring at the kunoichi lying next to him. To be honest, her reaction didn't surprise him at all. He just accepted the fact that in order to achieve what he wanted, he would have to tell the medic quite a lot about why she was now in the Akatsuki's secret hideout. If he didn't find out one detail in advance, then Obito's plan regarding Itachi was already on the verge of failure. Because of one little thing. Uchiha couldn't afford to fail. Especially now, when his life's goal was just a few steps away from being realized. All that was left was to remove the interfering elements. Itachi Uchiha, being terminally ill, needed the help of a qualified medic to delay his death. Why do you think that was? The girl winced slightly at the mention of the S-rank missing Nin's name. She didn't believe what she heard. She didn't believe that her patient would be one of the most dangerous criminals in the shinobi world. But for Sakura, that wasn't the worst thing. If all of this turned out to be true, that she really was going to help the missing Nin, then, could she be called a traitor? Definitely. Yes. Traitor. Apostate. These words echoed like a dull pain somewhere in the depths of the subconscious. However, the worst thing was to realize one thing. She betrayed Sasuke. But she promised that she would always be there, she always forced her help. So what now? She tried to save his murderous brother from certain death when he was the first and most serious threat to Sasuke since Orochimaru. That can't be justified. Or maybe it's all a bluff. Some kind of game? No, the goal of this psycho is to mislead her for some specific purposes of the criminal organization, that's all. Now this is what I wanted to believe most of all. Well, nothing comes to mind? The girl shuddered at the unusually cold voice, but she didn't answer, deciding to adopt the tactic of ignoring this rather strange conversation. However, the Nuke Nin didn't like it at all. If you remain silent, there's no way we can have the conversation we both need. Right now, it all depends on you. How exactly you die. Everything inside the girl froze. The reminder of her imminent death noticeably diminished her enthusiasm. She had to change her plan of action immediately. "Tell me, since I don't have much time left, why should I have believed you at all?" Sakura looked at her interlocutor without any malice. Now it was really important for her to hear his answer, because it was in it that she had a bitter hope that all this would turn out to be nothing more than some kind of cruel game in which she found herself only by chance. "There is no point in me lying to you," the missing Nin answered simply and confidently, making the kunoichi firmly realize that he was not lying. "And I will prove it to you as we progress in our common history. I am sure you can guess why Itachi was in no hurry to say goodbye to life." "Sasuke," Haruno almost whispered, but the interlocutor still managed to hear the answer. "True. The clan's business does not let them both go after so many years. And you know how it must end." Itachi understood that he had little time, and it was impossible for him to fight against his brother in his current state. He had only 2 weeks left, no more. The girl raised her eyes wide with surprise to the Nuke Nin. "How do you know that?" You used genjutsu on me to find out about that?" Sakura was overcome with unprecedented anger. Uchiha only smirked at her statement. And again, there would obviously be no sense in this. "I know about this disease for certain, so to speak firsthand." "What are you talking about?" Haruno already had a vague idea of what he was getting at. "Again, it's all very simple. I thought you'd be much smarter, Sakura." No, was it just her imagination, or was there really disappointment in his voice? "I'm one of those involved in creating this virus." For a moment there was deathly silence in the room. The girl's head was completely confused after hearing this. One of the Akatsuki is trying to kill another with a virus? That simply can't be. I can guess that you think that this is highly questionable, but I had my own reasons for that, which I have absolutely no time to share with you. I am very sorry. I will only say that the credit for the invention of this virus lies entirely or partially with Sasori. You happened to meet him, as far as I know. Yes, I had a chance to meet her. Of course, that's how her fight with the S-class missing Nin should be described, the memories of which, even after so much time, still haunt her. Forcing her to wake up at night in a cold sweat and check if all her limbs are in place. What? But now the picture was slowly starting to come together. It wasn't hard to believe that Sasori was the inventor of this disease, especially if you knew his passion for poisons and other such things. But why bother so much to get rid of one person, and a member of the organization at that? Maybe. No, Haruno didn't even think about such questions. She didn't know and couldn't know all the secrets of this famous criminal organization, so trying to understand anything now was pointless. Another question was much more important. And what about that incident in the small village? That was also your doing. Akasuna needed to conduct several experiments. We had one test subject, but the virus was still imperfect. This person could easily infect others. Which is what happened. I see. But how did you get rid of the medical staff? What were you witnessing, and why? The girl paused for a second. Why didn't you get rid of me? Everything that happened then was an unforeseen set of circumstances. I would even admit my guilt if I cared about those people. The medics were killed, the memories of them were erased both from the documents and from the memories of those few with whom they had contact. You know that in that village there were not just ordinary doctors, but doctors who belonged to the Umbu at that time? I think you won't be surprised if I say that information about this case is top secret in Konoha and was simply not disclosed. The top brass again did not want to dirty their hands in someone else's blood, leaving everything a secret. The girl looked at the Nuke Nin with confusion. For some reason, it seemed to her that the last words were not addressed to her. The interlocutor pretended not to notice her confusion. It doesn't matter. You may not believe it, but I didn't kill you only because I considered you harmless. I let you live. At these words the Kunoichi's heart sank. She raised her emerald eyes to the missing Nin, wanting to make sure of the truth of his words. It was incredible to realize that just a few years ago she could have quietly disappeared into the shinobi world, becoming an innocent victim in the machinations of Akatsuki. You don't have to thank me for the couple of years of life I gave you. I admit, in my entire long existence there haven't been many cases where I allowed myself to be so wrong. Sakura was silent, unable to answer anything. Now everything became relatively clear. And regarding her fate, everything was crystal clear. The medic was sure that this man knew that she had already managed to discover something important in the first samples of the analysis. Although, it was not important anymore, was it? Sorry, but our conversation is coming to an end. I couldn't kill you right away, to Sakura's silent question. Why? The missing Nin only briefly said. I needed to make sure of something. Thank you for the informative conversation. Goodbye, Harino Sakura. Blind hope Darkness. Total silence. The only sensation is one of mad dizziness, as if the body itself is in motion, not obeying the mind. No, this is all nonsense. What kind of control over the body can we even talk about when the person is dead? Am I dead? In the depths of my subconscious, only one stupid, disgusting question echoed like a dull knock, preventing me from completely plunging into darkness. Don't think about it. That voice again. For some reason it seems that he already dominates her consciousness completely. She is in his power. All of her. There is a complete emptiness in her consciousness, and only fragmentary thoughts slip through occasionally, now no longer having much meaning. These are fading memories. Everything is mixed here: early childhood, studying at the academy, the adventures of Team Number 7, Sasuke's departure, training with Tsunade Shisho, and the last moments recorded in memory. Talking to one of the Akatsuki? Damn, what was his name? I can't remember. No, I'm not even trying. For the last time, A vague image of a man in a mask appeared in his mind. And 2 scarlet dots flashed somewhere in the background. And then, oblivion. Uchiha never accepted death. But it just so happened, it always followed him. And now she is going to take another person, one way or another connected to Itachi. How to get rid of this bloody mantle, woven from the deaths of others, which covers your entire being, your entire life? Itachi is only mortal, he is not able to resolve this issue. All that remains is to accept, realizing his powerlessness before the inevitable fact? How many times has he had to accept his fate anew and all the darkness that he has spread not only to himself, but also to those who, albeit briefly, were still nearby? Not today. Uchiha is tired of indulging death. Finding Haruno in the abandoned Akatsuki hideout was not a difficult task. The Uchiha just needed to put the puzzle together correctly. Sakura could not arouse interest in anyone except the great false shinobi, because Itachi more than once felt someone else's gaze on him while observing Haruno. Moreover, Uchiha knew who it belonged to. Everyone knows for sure that Akatsuki consists of, in a sense, extraordinary shinobi, each with his own dark past, which only the Nukenin himself knows about. In this organization, it is not customary to spread information about yourself. Besides, they all gather together for general meetings too rarely. However, Itachi already on the second day of joining Akatsuki noticed a strange cloud of chakra next to him, which was constantly in close proximity. This is how Uchiha met Setsu. However, only thanks to logical conclusions did Uchiha figure out his observer. At first, he believed that he was simply being tested, but the surveillance did not stop even after months. It became constant. Itachi did not react to this in any way. Even in brief encounters with Setsu at general meetings, the Uchiha played the blind man, showing no outward signs of being aware of his constant companion. Setsu seemed to accept the game. However, before this only concerned the two of them, and the one who gave this missing Nin orders to keep an eye on the Uchiha. The one who called himself Madara crossed all boundaries this time. Itachi was right as always. As soon as he got closer to the supposed location of Haruno and the supposed leader, Uchiha immediately sensed the familiar heavy chakra and the barely perceptible chakra of the girl. The latter gave rise to unpleasant thoughts. Didn't you have time? But this thought, as soon as it appeared on its own, immediately dissolved into the depths of the subconscious. There is no time to reason. Always collected and with several options for action on missions, Itachi is forced to improvise this time. But one thing is clear. The fight is inevitable. After all, only a blind fool would not understand that Haruno in this situation is only serving as bait to provoke him. But why? Uchiha should have already found this out directly from his opponent. However, the first thing to do was to save Sakura. No other way. Uchiha cannot allow another victim to die because of him. You're right on time, Itachi. I was sure that this girl was the best option to attract your attention, right? Is she dead? Ignoring the false Madara's words, the missing Nin focused all his attention on the immobilized Sakura. There were no visible injuries, however. It was impossible to tell if she was breathing. Not exactly. I was interrupted. But I'm used to finishing everything, and you know that well. Leave her. The masked shinobi took this as the first and last warning. He had known Uchiha for a long time, and he understood that he would not wait. The Nukenin took a few steps away from the lying girl. Of course. She will die without me. Itachi involuntarily tensed. From what he had heard earlier, he knew for sure that Haruno was alive, and that was at least encouraging. He was not too late. But the last words brought on dark thoughts. What are you talking about? No visible emotion on his face, only his voice became harsher. She's already infected with active particles. She has less time left than you, Itachi, the masked shinobi said in a simple, everyday tone. At first I wanted to just kill her, since this girl really did interfere where she shouldn't have, but when I learned of your approach, I changed my plans a little. Do you want to know what will happen to you in a few weeks? He received no answer. The activated Manjikyu Sharingan spoke louder than words. Well, this is what Uchiha Obito ultimately achieved, firmly following the plan he had conceived, even though it still had to be adjusted a little. However, Itachi was wrong. The Akatsuki leader had no intention of engaging him in battle. The main thing was done. Without making eye contact with Itachi, knowing full well that it would be tantamount to instant death, Obito silently dissolved into his own technique, leaving the Uchiha and Haruno alone in the empty darkness. Disappeared without saying goodbye. Honestly, Itachi was indifferent to the intentions of this shinobi at the moment. Uchiha silently leaned over Sakura, who at this time was already starting to breathe heavily. Itachi studied the girl's pale face with a piercing gaze. A fight had already begun inside her. Barely touching the strands of pink curls on her forehead, the Nuke-Nin almost took his hand away. She was all burning. Noisy breathing was heard. So, he was regaining consciousness. Now the worst would begin. Uchiha knew from himself the symptoms of the first attack were obvious, but apparently in a more complicated form. She may not be able to bear it. Perhaps it is worth sparing her the inevitable suffering. The thought popped into Itachi's head on its own. But he wasn't going to reject it. Killing her was the most rational option in this case. If he didn't, he would only give her a painful reprieve. Sakura would suffer in agony too, begging for help. Begging for what the Uchiha couldn't give her. He had gone through all this torment alone, and he knew how unbearable it was. But it would be even more unbearable to watch another person suffer. A person who suffers because of his fault. At this moment, Itachi felt a strange feeling of hostility towards himself. The realization of his own guilt was tearing his insides apart. That was why he had to decide everything quickly and without hesitation. All the heavy thoughts instantly dissipated when Itachi felt a strong grip on his right hand. He looked down. The girl, still not having fully recovered, unconsciously grabbed the Uchiha's hand as if it were her last hope. Like a sick person in agony, grabbing the edges of the sheet, frantically squeezing the white, nondescript fabric in his hands, as if it would ease the pain. Itachi gently squeezed the hot one in his. No, now he is her blind hope. Sentence Still alive. This was the first thought that appeared in her still completely clouded consciousness. And here Sakura did not know whether to be happy about it or not. Her whole body was aching from some strange, painful fatigue. Her head was splitting so much that she did not even want to open her eyes to get at least the slightest idea of her location and try to somehow analyze what had happened. But there was a lot to think about. Even though Sakura couldn't afford to focus on anything specific in her mind right now, she still clearly remembered the last conversation she had with one of the Akatsuki before passing out at the most inopportune moment. What did he inject me with? A nasty shiver ran down her spine, causing the girl to involuntarily twitch. A throbbing pain suddenly echoed somewhere in the back of her head, causing the pink-haired girl to wince crookedly. Her intuition told her that everything was not good at all. However, in order to finally confirm her far from rosy assumptions, she needed to find out at least a minimum of information about the current state of affairs. What happened after she passed out? And where is she now anyway? To do this, first of all, it would not hurt to at least look around, assess her condition and, in fact, her chances of getting out unharmed. However, even simply lifting her eyelids turned out to be an impossible task for Haruno. At some point, Sakura caught herself thinking that she simply didn't want to open her eyes. She simply didn't want to. Some strange, heavy feeling of apathy covered the girl completely, not allowing her to make even the slightest movement, to show any obvious signs of her own body functioning. I know you're already awake, Sakura. Don't make any sudden movements. The girl again showed no signs of life, but her heart still beat faster. Now the kunoichi already knew who this voice really belonged to. Strangely, she felt nothing inside herself towards this person. Not a drop of any anger, hatred. And the most surprising thing, what Sakura noticed for herself, she was not at all afraid of such a close presence of one of the most dangerous Nuke-Nin in the shinobi world. She was not afraid, did not feel a hidden fear even deep in her subconscious. Even if her life was completely in his hands. I don't care. Right now, Haruno most of all wanted not to look for ways out to save herself, she wanted to switch off again. But these are not the right thoughts at all, right? Sakura doesn't even think about it. After all, these are not her thoughts. Not her desires. Why are you hesitating? The kunoichi herself did not recognize her own voice. So alien, so dead. There was no answer, to which the girl's face distorted into a weak smile. If she hadn't been so broken right now, she probably would have told him everything she thought. It was all over for her anyway. Suddenly, Sakura felt as if she was covered in heat, and she opened her eyes sharply, groaning weakly. Her insides twisted, and every cell of her body was filled with a burning pain. But it didn't last long, just a few moments. The girl's consciousness dissolved again in something weightless. The pain remained somewhere far away. Sakura lost absolutely any feelings, thoughts. Only emptiness. The long-awaited loss of reality. If only she knew what these immersions in imaginary illusions were worth. I thought we were going to get rid of Itachi, weren't we? Setsu looked questioningly at his interlocutor. To be honest, he never fully understood all of Obito's plans. Sometimes it even seemed to him that he was acting based solely on personal motives. He's almost dead already. Don't worry about it. However, for some reason Zetsu was too skeptical about this assurance. Why was it necessary to leave with Uchiha a half-dead, but still qualified medic, who was already generally aware of Itachi's condition and had even begun to conduct research? No, Obito was not a complete idiot, although he had been playing this role in the person of Tobi for quite a long time. Or maybe, this image had influenced him too much? Yes, Setsu never understood this shinobi. With a strange chuckle, Setsu literally dissolved into the thicket of trees. There was no point in being here anymore, because the missing Nin understood that he would not get more from the Akatsuki leader now. With him, you always had to wait. And Zetsu already thought that he had developed this quality to perfection. Left alone with himself and his surroundings, Obito casually tore off a leaf from a nearby tree and began to peer intently into the plant's tiny veins. Being cut off from the clan used to be rightly equated with death. He's been dead for a long time. As am I, by the way. A moment later, only the faint rustling of leaves betrayed the recent presence of a living soul. The girl sat, located in the farthest corner of the cave. Haruno felt his chakra. It was everywhere. Sakura was literally at a dead end. She had woken up only recently, immediately figuring that she no longer felt that unnatural weakness in her body at all. Immediately opening her eyes and looking around carefully, the pink-haired girl noted to herself that she was in the same place where Tobi had transferred her. Only now the kunoichi no longer felt any binding seals. True, this did not make breathing any easier. Sakura didn't understand anything at all. And all attempts to sensibly assess the situation ended in complete failure. And what did she actually have? It was unknown how long she had been in the Akatsuki hideout. It was unknown why they had left her alive. Haruno remembered absolutely nothing after she had fallen into the darkness after talking to Tobi. The last thing that was clearly imprinted in the girl's mind was a flashing needle, and then a second of pain in her right hand. The first and only assumption was that she had been injected with a slow-acting poison. But why and for what reason the girl didn't even want to think about. The main thing was that she was still alive. As soon as Sakura put her palm to her chest, the entire small room was illuminated by a weak greenish light. The pink-haired girl stared intently at her hands, emitting a healing glow, and involuntarily frowned. Something was wrong. The flow of chakra was too confused. You are infected. Sakura shuddered in surprise, and the greenish light went out in an instant. Only then did she notice the male figure standing right at the entrance. And hadn't she noticed how he had entered here so unnoticed, and how long he had been standing there? The girl looked closely at the missing Nin, simultaneously digesting the phrase she had just heard. Everything inside me went cold. No, I can't show my weakness. But it's all over anyway. I see. And what else do you want from me now? Do you think I'll develop a cure faster if my own life depends on it? Was that your plan? Sakura looked at Uchiha with undisguised hatred, not at all afraid to meet his gaze. No, she even wanted it. Wanted to look for at least a second into the eyes of the one who, in fact, was the reason for her broken life. It was he who broke Sasuke. It was he who brought her to a certain point. It's all him. But now Haruno felt the least sorry for herself. She was disgusted. Disgusted by her own stupidity, because she, like the last fool, fell for his game of ambush shinobi. If she had been even a little more reasonable, she would have immediately reported this to the Hokage, and everything would not have ended the way it did. Nothing more is needed from you. Believe me, no one will harm you anymore, you are free. Haruno involuntarily shuddered again from this firm steel voice. She did not understand anything. Could they just let her go? But he is also sick, so why? What new game? Sakura looked at her interlocutor with suspicion, but his gaze remained impenetrable. Sasuke's image immediately popped into her mind. After all, with him, she had never been able to read anything from the usual range of emotions on his face. And now she was failing again. Even though it was not Sasuke himself who was in front of her at the moment, but his brother. Sakura knew about him only from stories about the genius killer of his own clan and from those short meetings in the hospital, although she could not even imagine who she was dealing with. She trusted, she was used. It's simple. But for some reason now she believed this man's words again. Sakura felt that she hated him with all her soul, but at the same time she was not afraid at all. Maybe her instinct for self-preservation was too inhibited, or maybe this is how it should be. If she admitted it to herself, this man hadn't really done any harm. However, he had come to her for help back then. Something told the kunoichi that this time, the Akatsuki members were acting separately, or perhaps even for different reasons. Don't think that I'm worried about your fate, but what about you? Only now did Sakura notice that she was allowing herself to talk to one of the most dangerous shinobi too freely. Even her weak voice never wavered, even her gaze never looked away. She wants to be on equal terms. You should take better care of yourself, Sakura. Haruno shuddered involuntarily. It was too unusual to hear her name from his lips. Itachi, as if not paying attention to her unusual trembling of the shoulders, continued in a smooth and measured tone. You have an accelerated form of disease progression. You need to hurry if you still want to live. The girl looked at him in surprise, and then her face twisted into a bitter smile. How she wanted to throw out everything that had been gnawing at her soul since she woke up. But now was not the place or time for tears. Do I have a right to life when I secretly helped an S-rank criminal? Am I not considered a traitor to my native village from now on? Did I? Sakura stopped short at these words and looked at Uchiha with pain. Didn't I betray Sasuke? She herself did not know why, but now she wanted to hear his answer. To hear her sentence from the lips of a merciless killer. Believe in what you think you need to believe. How simple, though. Sakura turned away from the Uchiha, pressing her knees to her chest, as if seeking at least some protection. And what should she do now? But her thoughts were interrupted by a ragged cough. The kunoichi immediately turned towards the missing nin, and something inside her snapped. Now she saw. Again she saw the symptoms of an acute attack that were already familiar to her. A tight lump rose in her throat. No, it would happen again before her eyes. And again she would just watch. Sakura looked at the Uchiha, hunted. His recently imperturbable expression was now distorted by uncontrollable flashes of pain. The attack was getting stronger with every second. Itachi instinctively grabbed his throat and sank to the cold stone floor. Sakura immediately jumped up from her seat, not really thinking about what and why she was doing. Don't come any closer. As soon as Haruno approached the Uchiha, the Sharingan bearer's eyes looked at her, and she read a hidden warning in it. Her heart began to beat faster. But at the moment, she was least afraid for her life. No, was the last thing Uchiha could read from the girl's lips before he finally lost touch with reality. Commentary on sentence. I have to inform you that the author is starting to have some fun days, which can be easily associated with one word. Session. Therefore, I don't know when I will be able to start writing the sequel again, but definitely not in this busy time. Thank you for your attention. Lost Sakura was lost. It was unknown how long she had been sitting motionless next to the unconscious Uchiha. She sat and did not take her eyes off the missing nin's headband on his pale, thin face. Why did he do this? Wanted to help? Haruno rubbed her eyes, which were red from recent tears, and for the first time turned her gaze to the dark passage, which was the only exit in this room, but then she cautiously turned back towards the Uchiha. I won't leave until I know everything. I hope there's still time before Konoha starts looking for me. An unpleasant chill still ran down the girl's back, causing Haruno to involuntarily wince. She was completely confused. She did not understand this man's actions at all. Not at all. Her mind refused to sensibly evaluate what had happened and what she had just concluded for herself through her own efforts. Only during this time there were even more questions than answers already received. She needed to talk to him. Itachi Uchiha had to explain everything. Had to explain why he had taken on her pain. A little earlier. He's unconscious. That was the verdict the kunoichi had made as soon as she managed to feel the faint pulse of the unconscious Uchiha. Sakura herself hadn't realized at what point her hand had automatically reached for his wrist in order to detect the slightest sign of life. Since when had she started acting so recklessly? First, she'd been tricked like a little girl, forced to work for the village's trader, and now she was in no hurry to return to the Hokage's residence of her own free will to report the true location of the neutralized S-rank missing nin. These random thoughts wouldn't leave Haruno's tired head. However, now was not the time to calculate how, significantly, she'd screwed up this time. Yes, Sakura was truly lost. Lost within herself. Haruno had completely lost control of herself, bidding farewell to common sense. Maybe her duty as a medic had played a role in her consciousness, or maybe God knows what prompted her to stay at her own risk with this S-rank criminal, because of whom she now shared his fate. But Haruno was thinking about this the least of all right now. To tell the truth, she still had a hard time believing that all this was happening for real. She couldn't have been infected. This was another lie. An attempt at manipulation. Playing on emotions. Anything. But not what Sakura simply forbids herself to think about. But still, she couldn't forget the missing nin's words so easily. Itachi Uchiha was more convincing than ever when he spoke of her infection. She already felt in full measure how he was once again suppressing her psychologically, forcing her to submit to him, to believe. And Haruno couldn't resist it. Even in the last stage of the disease, without using the Sharingan, Itachi Uchiha was stronger than her. Stronger internally. Sakura couldn't help but accept it. But, in such a strange relationship that had arisen between them, she didn't feel like a victim at all. Not then, on the first day of their meeting, not now. There is extreme exhaustion. But, even for this disease, this is an unusual reaction. Sakura thought deeply. This is the most common fainting spell against the background of extreme exhaustion. But, it was not caused by another attack of the disease. Haruno blinked nervously and frowned. She shouldn't be doing this. She had nothing else to do here anyway. After all, she was truly free now. No one could stop her from returning to Konoha. At least Uchiha Itachi was definitely not dangerous at the moment. But the desire to put everything in its place, at least in her clouded consciousness, which came from nowhere, nailed Sakura to the spot and did not allow her to take a single step towards the saving exit. She's just going to look at him. It wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary, right? Haruno wasn't going to help him. She's still in her right mind. The small room was illuminated by a weak greenish glow. The medic began a full study of the Uchiha's general condition, hoping to find the reason for his disconnection. But not even a minute had passed before the flow of healing chakra suddenly died down, and Sakura herself felt a surge of unnatural fatigue. Exhaling loudly, the girl stared at her own hands with bewilderment and some irritation. Damn, what is this? I've never lost control of my chakra, it's impossible. Or is this all I can do now? I'm not being held back by the seals anymore. Really? Sakura frowned, and her lips involuntarily pressed into a thin line. Everything was gradually becoming clear. She had hoped until the very end that he could lie to her about this too. But no. There was no more room for falsehood here. Carefully touching the edge of the missing nin's cloak, the girl mindlessly traced the outline of the red cloud. This man shouldn't be among them. He didn't look like a predator thirsty for death and blood. No. At least not to her. No matter how much she wanted to, Haruno saw him as nothing more than a hunted animal, and even now she couldn't explain why. He didn't lie about me being infected. But now he's unconscious, and I don't feel any obvious signs of the disease. An unnecessary sacrifice. Sakura unexpectedly pulled her hand back and clenched it into a fist, preparing to hit the cold wall with all her might. But no blow followed. Her hand froze in the air, a few centimeters from the stone's surface. A quiet sob was heard. The girl's fragile shoulders began to tremble slightly. Misunderstanding, fear, despair, all of this suddenly washed over the girl. A small shiver ran down her back once again. Thanks to him, she can now think clearly. Thanks to him, she does not writhe in pain. This is reality. But Haruno can't accept her. It's impossible. It's impossible to realize that she really is now terminally ill. That Uchiha Itachi really decided to take pity on her and immerse her in an illusion, spending the last of his chakra for this. Because of her, he is now in such a completely vulnerable state. And Sakura doesn't know what to feel. Gratitude or hatred? Although, who is she kidding? Herself? She could never find the strength to hate Uchiha. Real hatred. Like his younger brother felt. Sakura tried to hate. But looking now at the unnaturally pale face of a man with barely traceable breathing, who had quite consciously decided to spend his last strength to fight her first attack, Haruno understood that she could not feel due hostility towards this murderer and traitor. After all, because of her, Uchiha could now at any moment lose his already fading life. Why did he do this? Another game of manipulation with third parties? She needed answers. And Haruno would get them at any cost. One way or another, all that was left was to wait. Now her soul was torn apart by mixed feelings. She was already tired of rushing about in her own thoughts, in her own guesses. Tired of making assumptions. Tired of yet another Uchiha in her life, who in one moment turned her entire existence into sheer darkness, and in general put her life into question. Deciding to stop thinking about something that she alone couldn't comprehend, the kunoichi tiredly closed her eyes and leaned against the wall, hoping not to fall into a deep sleep. However, she didn't even have time to doze off. A light gust of cool air right next to her face made Haruno suddenly open her eyes. But it was too late. A sharp blade was pressed against Sakura's neck, glinting disgustingly in the darkness. There was no chance to repel the attack of the unknown. One more move and you're dead, you understand? Comment to Lost. Silly girl silly girl. The kunoichi was pressed hard against the wall, forcing her to gulp air intermittently. It was already a relief that she no longer felt the cold steel on her neck. Her thoughts were confused. The girl felt how an unusual weakness was enveloping her eyelids. That nasty state of complete devastation was rolling over her again. Anger at herself, at her helplessness, flared up in Haruno again. A tight lump rose in her throat. She wanted to scream. She wanted to destroy everything left and right. Powerlessness deprived her of any choice. Again she had to obey someone. Again she had to become a weak-willed toy in the hands of unknown people. Betray someone again. Sakura can't fight back. Haruno feels that if she weren't being held down now, she would have slid helplessly onto the cold floor on wobbly legs. She would have joined the unconscious Uchiha fugitive. When did she become such a wimp again? Clenching her fists until her knuckles turned white, the girl glared at the cloaked figure. The man did nothing, but he didn't loosen his grip, keeping Haruno upright and pinned to the wall. Silence. Only hoarse breathing could be heard somewhere very close. She had fallen into the clutches of a predator again. Lowering her clouded gaze, Sakura again saw the red clouds that her eyes hated to the point of fury. Another Akatsuki. The kunoichi squeezed her eyes shut painfully, wishing that this was just an illusion, a game of her exhausted mind. In vain. The clouds did not evaporate. Cold sweat appeared on the forehead. "Why are you hesitating, you bastard? What's wrong with Itachi-san?" A muffled murmur came from right next to her ear, causing her body to involuntarily press itself even more tightly against the wall. Such closeness was too disgusting for Haruno. Closing her eyes, the girl shook her head weakly, thus letting the missing nin understand that he should loosen his grip. She was incapable of escape or any unnecessary movements anyway. He should have noticed this himself from her ragged size. Haruno wasn't at all interested in why one of the Akatsuki was attacking, while the other wasn't even trying to finish off the Uchiha, but on the contrary. She didn't give a damn about their relationship. But for some reason, Akatsuki themselves didn't want to leave her alone. Feeling that her body was no longer constrained by anything, the girl carefully moved away from the wall a little to the side, still holding on with one hand for support. "An attack," Haruno said as she exhaled. The Nuke-nin, at the same time, dropped to his knees and, no longer paying much attention to the exhausted Kunoichi, looked intently at Uchiha Itachi, who was still lying motionless. "You seem to be having trouble with your business, Itachi-san." Kisame Hashigaki stood up abruptly, already vaguely guessing what might have happened in the next half hour, when he sensed a powerful familiar chakra in the forest. He was too late. And since his partner was practically incapacitated, it was safe to say that the mission to capture the scrolls had been a failure. Things were going interestingly for Akatsuki now. Games unknown to him, fake missions. Kisame was far from all this. The swordsman stood up straight and looked sideways at Sakura, not removing the maniacal grin from his face. What to do with her? A difficult question. But at the same time, so simple for a renegade from the Hidden Mist village. Kill? As if reading the criminal's thoughts, Haruno raised her languid, expectant gaze to him, meeting his predatory gaze. A nasty chill ran down her spine. Now her fate was being decided. The swordsman came closer to Haruno. She didn't even move from her place, completely lost in one expectation. Time stood still. Sakura heard nothing, saw nothing. Only the frantic beating of her own heart echoed loudly in her temples. And what is it like? Death at the hands of a Nuke-nin, a criminal of rank S. The metal cut through the air in an instant. Haruno didn't even have time to understand anything. "You'll come with me," Hashigaki said in a routine tone, carefully running his hand over the bandaged Samahada. It seemed that today she would not be able to taste the new chakra. The owner decided to postpone the meal, throwing the weapon over his shoulder. Sakura still didn't move, not yet fully understanding that for a while the threat to her life had passed. Grinning, Kisame couldn't help but add, "If, of course, you want to live. I'm not insisting." "Why?" "Itachi-san will deal with you himself when he wakes up. I warn you, don't do anything stupid. I'm too unrestrained." Sakura didn't even think about whether to resist. No, deep down she even wanted to follow Uchiha. No matter what common sense said. Haruno was already used to playing with death. And at least this way there was a chance to get answers to her questions. And Sakura looked thoughtfully at Uchiha. She still hadn't lost hope of finding a way to get rid of the virus. This was now her first and foremost direct interest, and Haruno was already beginning to suspect that she had been infected precisely for this purpose. "Okay," the Kunoichi replied evenly, still trying not to show her own excitement. The Nuke-nin chuckled. It sounded like she was making some kind of equal deal. But did she even have a choice but to blindly follow one of the Akatsuki again, although now fully aware of what she was doing, or should she just accept instant death from an unknown source? No, Haruno won't back down. Besides, it's a great opportunity to gain invaluable information about Akatsuki and then share it with Lady Tsunade. If, of course, Sakura can get out unharmed. And not die prematurely from a damned disease or at the hands of criminals. The Kunoichi flinched when she felt someone else's palm touch hers. Cold. Wet. The girl shuddered in disgust, but the grip was too strong to pull her hand away. A muffled laugh was heard in the darkness. Sakura looked up and saw that the missing nin was already supporting Itachi's body with his other free hand. I repeat. Don't do anything stupid. Samahada is very hungry. Sakura looked at the large figure next to her with confusion, unable to make out the shinobi's facial features in the complete darkness. Samahada? Are you hungry? Hold on to me. Before the girl could figure anything out, everything suddenly swam before her eyes. Another moment, and the gloomy cave was completely empty, leaving only traces of the shinobi's recent presence. Where are we? Haruno responded, catching her breath and in a hoarse, not her own voice. Now she could easily see her new captor. He certainly looked terrifying, sharp facial features, in which one could find something shark-like, a beastly grin. For some reason, it occurred to the girl to compare this man to a piranha, a bloodthirsty, unpredictable predator of the water world. And is he even a human being? More like a sea devil emerging from the water to quench its thirst for blood. Itachi-san will answer you himself if he deems it necessary. The missing nin said briefly and went inside the small abandoned house, near which they found themselves after moving from the ill-fated cave with the aim of moving their partner to a more convenient place for him to stay. The first thought of the medical nin was to run up and help drag the Uchiha to the bed, and also to conduct a primary examination of his condition again. Sakura desperately needed to know how long she had to wait for him to wake up. She herself was beginning to feel like her strength was at its limit again. However, the swordsman made a warning sign, forcing the girl to stay put. Kisame wasn't going to take any chances. Who knew what this girl could do, since Itachi-san had been messing around with her for so long? And what did it all lead to? At least tell me what your name should be, Sakura said to the man's back with feigned nonchalance. After all, she had never encountered this missing nin before. First, she needed to at least find out the name of the person she would be gathering information about. Kisame Hashigaki. Sakura. It doesn't matter, the man said lazily and closed the door behind him. The kunoichi who remained in the yard glanced at the closed door in some stupor and mute irritation. Damn blur! After standing outside for a while and looking around, Sakura realized that they were somewhere in the forest again. However, instead of a cave, there was an abandoned hut. That's all that had changed. This is most likely the border of the Fire Nation's territories. But I'm not sure. In any case, that's not important now. Sakura thoughtfully raised her gaze towards the horizon. There was tension in the air, the grayish clouds were getting thicker. With an unpleasant aftertaste in her soul, Haruno looked at the endless sky that was darkening before her eyes and did not dare to move from her place. Naruto, Tsunade-sama, are you guys looking for me already? Meanwhile, Kisame sat motionless next to his partner and watched the girl's silhouette outside the window without much interest. Silly girl. She doesn't yet know that she is already dead to her comrades. Comment to silly girl. I have vague doubts that everything is going downhill, but I still decided to put it out there for the readers to judge. Please, if everything is bad, let me know what exactly. I will improve. Go away go away Hey. Get up already. The first thing Haruno felt through her deep sleep was that she was roughly shaken by the shoulder, causing the girl to wince in displeasure and mumble something inarticulate. The next moment, heavy, retreating footsteps were heard, and the kunoichi sighed barely audibly. It had been too long since she had managed to get a full night's sleep. Stretching with pleasure, Sakura turned on her side and pressed her knees to her chest. No one would wake her up today. Even if Tsunade-sama burst in on her now, it would probably have absolutely no effect on Haruno. However, the girl could no longer sleep undisturbed. Her stomach responded to its owner with a dull rumble, reminding him that it was high time to remember his natural needs. And indeed, Sakura noted with strange indifference that she did not even remember the last time she ate anything. Everything was mixed up in her head again. All she remembered was that a guy from Akatsuki with a very strange appearance brought her to some hut. She had to wait until the exhausted Uchiha came to his senses and finally get answers regarding his fate, and completely devote herself to finding a cure. Haruno's eyes widened and she rose from the hard bed. The girl looked around in complete confusion. How did she end up in this small room, where even through a small window with an inset frame there was barely any light? She didn't remember. Thanks to the weak light source, Sakura could still easily notice the weightless dust particles floating in the air. No one had lived here for a long time. The furniture was very minimal, a bedside table, also covered in thick layers of dust, and a wooden chair with a fallen back, standing right by the window. The kunoichi exhaled heavily. The air was too stuffy. It was impossible to breathe freely. She just wanted to run away from this place. No matter where. Sakura grinned at her ridiculous thoughts, staring blankly at the door. Who would let her go now? At least, she definitely wouldn't get out alive now. Especially in her current state. A vague sense of alarm arose in the girl's mind. She didn't even remember how she fell asleep, or what happened next, when she entered that ill-fated house. And time was short, Haruno felt. Even in the cave, she had felt that she was far from well. Her thoughts were always confused. Everything was like in a fog. The girl had completely forgotten about sleep, about food. However, there were still no external signs of illness. And she knew perfectly well who was the cause of it. Haruno hadn't realized it yet. Deep down, that she was now in debt to this man. In debt to Itachi Uchiha. The door creaked unpleasantly, and Sakura automatically turned her head towards the sound. Everything inside me clenched, more from surprise than from fear. Uchiha Itachi stood in front of Sakura again and looked at her with a studying gaze as if nothing had happened. Kisame told you to get up. If I were you, I wouldn't test his patience and hurry up. His voice was a little lower than the one Haruno had heard before. The man's unevenly rising chest indicated that he was slightly out of breath. He's having a hard time making any movements now. What a fool! Having overcome the Irainin's desire to immediately chain this stubborn man to bed, while thoroughly scolding him for his careless attitude towards his own state of health, Sakura put on a mask of complete indifference, without responding to his words. The external changes in Uchiha did not confuse her at all. With the experienced eye of a doctor, the girl immediately noted to herself that he had come to his senses only recently, and the fact that Uchiha had now found within himself a grain of strength to stand and talk to her was equated to the highest degree of carelessness and recklessness. But screw it. Let him get rid of it as much as his body can. He's not a little boy. Haruno was sure that he understood perfectly well how this could end, and there was simply no point in telling him anything about it. Why? The girl responded a little rudely, demonstratively turning away from the guy. If he came to her first thing after waking up, then he definitely needed something. Sakura waited. She knew that his body would not last long under such a sudden load. There was a high chance of him passing out again. Sakura still could not resist and looked at the missing Nin again. His expression remained just as unperturbed. He didn't give a damn about his condition. Sakura. Haruno shuddered, trying to maintain at least a fraction of her fragile composure. She didn't understand why. Why did this viscous, alien voice cause such a contradictory reaction in her? It made her insides tremble. Once again made her submit. Believe. The man seemed to notice the kunoichi's confusion, so he paused for a moment, staring at the girl, but almost immediately continued again. I do not go back on my words. You are free. Nothing threatens you anymore. Really? The kunoichi quipped, having completely forgotten about her, ignoring. A silent bitterness squeezed her heart. Again, some unknown game. Of course, what could her life be worth? She was not a Jinchuriki, not a superior. Nobody, really. A medical shinobi, of which there are at least 100 in Konoha alone. But so why am I still being held in an unknown place? The question burst out of her lips. Sakura didn't even notice how she started screaming. My partner acted wisely, sparing your life and taking you with him. You wouldn't have walked more than a few meters towards the village, would you? Sakura looked at her interlocutor in bewilderment. No, was it her imagination, or did a good-natured grin appear on his face for a moment? Although he was right again. She really was too weak to move at all. I shouldn't have been there at all. The green eyes that gleamed in the dim light probably met the black pools of the Sharingan bearer for the first time in a while. All those feelings that had long ago managed to engulf the girl were easily read in her eyes: anger, rage, and impatience. In his eyes she saw only one thing: fatigue. Haruno was the first to look away. It was too hard. And why did she even catch herself for a moment thinking that she felt guilty towards this man? Should she still help? What nonsense! That's right. I was interrupted. Uchiha answered simply, as if that explained everything. An oppressive silence hung in the small room. The girls stood waiting for the missing Nin to continue, but Itachi seemed to have decided that Haruno knew enough about that. Well, in that case, Tsunade's student will go ahead. I have no idea what's going on with you and Akatsuki and why I was needed at all, not only by you. Haruno began in a trembling voice. But I understand why you saved me. Itachi looked up at her at these words. For the first time in their entire conversation, genuine attention appeared in his gaze. I'll be looking for a cure much more diligently now, right? Sakura spat out this phrase with caustic bitterness. You're right, he said calmly, and the kunoichi's fist clenched involuntarily at his words. But only partially. I repeat, you really are free. I don't need your medic Nin skills anymore, Sakura. The girl looked at the man with disbelief. He looked down, looking at his ring, still standing, leaning against the shabby wall. I gave you a chance then. Haruno listened, not even thinking of interrupting. She understood perfectly well what chance the renegade was talking about now. Because I know that you can find a cure for yourself. But you have 2 days left at most. Kisame will take you back. As soon as you return to Konoha, hurry. Next time my technique won't help you, Haruno Sakura. She still couldn't believe his words. A hoarse, intermittent cough sounded. Everything inside her clenched. It became unbearably painful. It became unbearably painful to look at him. And what about you, Uchiha Itachi? His strength had completely left him. Again. His face was distorted by a painful spasm. They both knew what was coming next. His legs gave way, and Uchiha, without making any attempt to stay upright, was lying on the cold, dirty floor in a moment. Loss of consciousness again. And it's not a fact that next time he will be able to wake up. Such thoughts swarmed in his exhausted mind, to which Uchiha smiled wryly. Well, at least he managed to fix something. But when did everything go wrong according to his carefully crafted plan? Uchiha Madara, this is what you wanted, right? The touch of warm hands did not allow him to find an answer to this question that had been tormenting Itachi for a long time. A minute later he felt a hard but warm surface under him. And strange hands were already unbuttoning the collar of the cloak that they both hated. Don't you dare pass out again! You can't! An excited, slightly frightened voice reached the Uchiha's fading consciousness. She's still worried that he won't wake up again. What a stupid girl. First of all, think about yourself now. You still have someone to live for, right, Haruno Sakura? Why, if you were so busy with me then why are you letting me go so easily now? A quiet whisper reached the keen ears of the Nukenin. No reaction to her words. Only her breathing became more intermittent. Sakura frantically clutched the edges of the sheet. Don't be silent! Really? Go away! A ragged sigh. You're free. No one. Akatsuki is gone. What? Haruno, not believing her ears, leaned closer to Uchiha's face. Was he really starting to go crazy? But Sakura was unable to achieve anything more from the renegade. Itachi Uchiha no longer showed signs of life. Equals return equals The girl, barely breathing, leaned over the headboard of the bed. Her gaze was riveted on his deathly pale face. Just a minute ago, Itachi Uchiha closed his eyelids for the last time, awaiting the inevitable end. And it came. Sakura tried to feel the pulse again to be on the safe side, but it was all in vain. Haruno stared blankly at the now lifeless body. I still couldn't believe it. At the moment when Itachi appeared before her after waking up, the kunoichi couldn't even imagine that his condition was so critical. Sakura swallowed involuntarily, feeling an unpleasant chill run down her spine. From the flood of realization, he knew everything perfectly well. He knew perfectly well that he would not remain in this state for long. Lost in thought, Sakura looked down. Only now did the kunoichi notice how much her hands were shaking. For a moment, the girl's face distorted into a pathetic semblance of a grin. Her body is more shocked than she is. Itachi Uchiha is dead. The murderer and renegade of her home village is dead. It's as simple as that. Nausea rose in her throat. Breathing this stale air became even more unbearable. Meanwhile, Sakura felt her legs give way and immediately felt the hard, cold floor beneath her, from which the unpleasant smell of old, rotten wood hit her nose. A weak, tortured sigh was heard in the dark room, of relief. Haruno had long wanted to simply fall down next to the Uchiha and stop, at least for a while, the stormy, incessant flow of the darkest and most confusing thoughts. That's it then. A rough, low voice sounded somewhere near the door to the room. Sakura didn't even turn her head. She was so indifferent to the appearance of a third person. Kisame Hashigaki. She was no longer particularly interested in her own fate. Let's go. There's nothing more for you to do here. Kisame effortlessly put Sakura on her feet, like a limp doll. She just looked at the missing Nin with a detached gaze. Yes, indeed, nothing. Having already lost the last of her strength, Sakura mindlessly trudged after the man along the long, narrow corridor, taking small steps with difficulty. Now her body was exhausted to the limit. And didn't this guy see what state she was in now? Lost in her thoughts, Sakura didn't even notice how they came out into a more spacious and bright room. It was noticeably cleaner here, and it seemed that the oppressive stuffiness was not felt. Meanwhile, Kisame turned to his captive and gestured towards a small table that stood opposite a wide window, which, as the kunoichi immediately noticed, had a badly cracked frame. "Let's eat and then we'll go." The apostate himself leaned silently against the wall, casting an expectant glance at the girl, as if nudging her in the right direction. But this was clearly unnecessary. Haruno herself did not notice how she was already sitting at the table and holding a plate with completely cold watery porridge in front of her, determined to eat it. Only now did Sakura realize how hungry she was. The kunoichi did not even care if her new acquaintances slipped some poison into it. However, this fear is stupid and groundless. Why mess around with poisons when even that healthy guy has a huge sword dangling over his shoulder, one swing of which will instantly make him say goodbye to life? As soon as the girl, still with trembling hands, brought a small metal spoon to her lips, a nasty nausea rose up in her throat again, completely inopportunely. Haruno involuntarily swallowed and threw the cutlery on the table. "Not now. I need to eat. I need to regain my strength. Let it throw me up." Meanwhile, Kisame continued to watch the girl without much interest. It was time to end all this. As Itachi-san had ordered. "I don't intend to wait. Don't delay." Sakura didn't react to the missing Nin's statement. She understood everything perfectly well without him. "Here you go." And without noticing how the missing Nin was literally at arm's length, the girl recoiled, but this action was completely unnecessary. Slowly turning around, she saw a transparent glass of water extended to her. Haruno nodded in confusion and immediately quickly snatched it from Kisame's hands, starting to greedily swallow the cold, icy water. After emptying the glass, Sakura felt relief as the urge to vomit gradually began to subside. Now she could definitely switch to food. "Thank you?" The kunoichi weakly squeezed out of herself, and without any preludes, began to eat the stew that was kindly provided to her. For now, Haruno decided to completely cast aside thoughts about the Uchiha. She would think about it later. As soon as she began to think more clearly. If, of course, such an opportunity for her already completely exhausted mind was foreseen in the near future. Nothing can be changed anyway. The dead do not rise again. "Ready?" As soon as Sakura finished her modest portion of completely bland porridge, Kisame approached the girl and placed his powerful hands on the table. The kunoichi tensed. "For what?" Sakura narrowed her eyes and looked at the missing Nin with distrust. In response, his face distorted into the usual terrifying crooked grin. "For your spectacular return." "What?" "How about?" The girl glanced at the dark corridor from which she had just barely crawled out after the nuke Nin. "That's none of your business, girl," the swordsman responded in a rough, chilling tone. The Nukanin's face instantly became completely impenetrable. There was no longer even that bestial grin. Everything inside the girl tightened, and some vague anxiety appeared. "You're too lucky as it is. People like you usually don't live long." Haruno didn't respond to the far from flattering comment about her personality. She just clenched her fists helplessly. Meanwhile, the missing Nin continued. "But I don't care about your fate at all. My last task is to deliver you to Konoha." Sakura lowered her head. "Uchiha kept his word here too. Did you ever doubt it? And what benefit do you get from this? It would be easier to finish me off right here." "No, Haruno has definitely been enjoying playing with fire lately." A muffled laugh was heard in response. "Right, yes, but," having cut off the phrase, the shinobi fell silent, turned around and walked with measured steps to the door that led outside. Sakura, as if on command, got up from the table and followed. A rotten floorboard creaked right next to the door, causing the girl to wince. The sound was too disgusting. Meanwhile, the swordsman was already outside and, apparently, was waiting for her. Taking one last look in the direction of that ill-fated room, where the body of the legendary shinobi killer now lay motionless, the girl jumped out into the air. Sakura quietly stopped behind the nuke Nin and listened to her surroundings. Not a sound. "There's no one here yet. Using the body flickering technique, we'll get there in a couple of minutes. The village isn't that far." Haruno ignored this information. What was more important to her now was that Kisame, having started, never finished speaking. Apparently, the swordsman quickly noticed the girl's expectant gaze on him, to which he said absent-mindedly, in an empty voice, "Remember who spared your life. A murderer and a renegade, huh?" Hashigami grinned again, meanwhile carefully stroking his sword. "I hope your own people don't take you away when they find out all the details." Sakura looked away, saying nothing. Judging by the swordsman's face, this assumption gave him some kind of unhealthy pleasure. Damn psycho. But he is right. When or if she returns to Konoha, there is no point in giving away all the details of her forced stay among individual Akatsuki members. After all, the actions of the young Kunoichi clearly smelled of betrayal. If only for two reasons. Why didn't she kill Uchiha Itachi back then, the first time he was unconscious in front of her? How did she manage to escape from the Akatsuki camp alive and relatively unharmed? No, that would definitely send her straight to Ibiki Marino's cell. While thinking such sad thoughts, Sakura was visited by a rather crazy thought. We need a completely different story. A different legend. A perfectly crafted one. But the next moment her train of thought was interrupted when her arm was pulled hard, pressing her to him. "Let's leave." And the two shinobi seemed to dissolve into the shadow of the young trees. Naruto. Now I definitely smelled something. Kiba quickly jumped off Akamaru and, not without his innate dexterity, reached Uzumaki. True, he was a little out of breath. The blonde looked at him with disbelief. Was this finally the long-awaited success after all this time? "Are you sure? Where?" the Jinchuriki said in a strange voice and stared at the dog owner. He frowned. "Without a doubt. It's her." Her scent. Kiba involuntarily looked away, noticing how hope immediately lit up in Naruto's eyes. The shinobi wasn't sure that their mutual friend was alive. "Kiba, tell me where!" the guy growled, completely impatient. The muscles in his cheekbones began to twitch. Both he and Inuzuka hadn't slept for a day. Together they were looking for Sakura Haruno, who had disappeared without a trace. And the dog owner had already begun to hint that this was all turning into a completely pointless exercise. Naruto stubbornly rejected all reasonable and unreasonable arguments in favor of his friend's assumption, continuing his search without any respite. Although Grandma Tsunade had equipped a special detachment under the leadership of Kakashi with the same purpose of determining Haruno's location and bringing her back, she firmly ordered Uzumaki not to leave the village under any circumstances, to stay with it and wait for news. But when did he ever listen to the sound advice of the fifth, or even follow her orders even a little? The fear for his friend's life simply paralyzed Uzumaki, but at the same time, paradoxically, it simply did not give him a chance to stop searching for the person close to him. The Jinchuriki believed that she was alive. She simply could not return on her own. She needed help. His help. "Don't fall behind, Uzumaki," was all the shinobi said, quickly heading in a direction known only to him. The Jinchuriki, surprisingly silent, followed him like a shadow. "Sakura-chan, please be patient." After a few minutes, Kiba slowed down and then stopped altogether, sniffing carefully. His eyes flashed for a moment like an animal. "Here." Uzumaki's heart began to beat several times faster, as if he had gotten a second wind. She. Literally a few meters away from them lay a pink-haired girl. The guys immediately jumped up. Breathing raggedly from running for so long without stopping, the guys tiredly collapsed on the ground next to their friend. "Sakura! Can you hear me? Sakura!" "Wait," Uzumaki Kiba said, catching his breath. "It seems she's unconscious. We need to go back immediately." The guy shook his head and looked at the painfully familiar features again. "Yes, now we can go back. After all, Sakura-chan is alive. Meet me in the darkness Commentary on Meet Me in the Dark. Sorry for taking so long with the continuation. And there's nothing to justify it with, sad face. This part was written from a phone, so if you find typos/errors, I'll be happy for PB, smiley face. Enjoy reading. They told me that you've already woken up, Sakura. Welcome back. A measured and painfully familiar voice made Sakura open her eyes almost with force, and then close them tightly from the unusually blinding bright light. The acrid smell of medicine hit her nostrils. A weak sigh of relief was heard. She was in her home hospital. In front of her, although Haruno hadn't had time to see her, she was absolutely sure of it. Her mentor, Tsunade Senju, was sitting now. Tsunade-sama. The kunoichi tried to say something, but she was immediately cut off, with a commanding tone of voice declaring, "Shut up. You are in the extreme stage of exhaustion, you know perfectly well what that means." Sakura nodded weakly, silently agreeing with her mentor's diagnosis. It really did seem like a colossal effort to her just to blink, let alone speak. Completely submitting to the desire of her exhausted body, Haruno closed her eyes. It seemed to have become even easier. "I just came to examine you. All the questions will come later. And not only from me," the fifth said in a gloomy tone and came closer to the girl. Sakura literally felt in her gut how tense her mentor was now. An unknown excitement was transmitted to her. "I understand everything, Tsunade-sama." Haruno opened her eyes slightly and, focusing her vision on the mentor sitting next to her, smiled softly. A feeling of complete peace washed over the girl with renewed vigor. Sakura had probably long since perceived this woman as her second mother. After all, it was she who gave her the right and the chance to survive in this cruel world of shinobi, teaching her everything she knew. And the kunoichi never forgot about it, responding to Tsunade Senju with boundless devotion and respect. Now Haruno was even incredibly happy that her mentor had decided to leave all the questions for later. Sakura was not at all ready to lie to this woman. To lie about Itachi Uchiha, to at least somehow try to hide their forced connection. Cold sweat appeared on the kunoichi's pale face. What do they already know? At the moment, she is completely unaware of what is happening around her. Does Konoha know who kidnapped her? Do they know how and where she came back from? Do they know about the quiet death of Itachi Uchiha? Sakura had no idea what information Tsunade Senju, sitting in front of her, had. One wrong word and she would have to spill absolutely everything, including collaborating with the Uchiha to find a cure and miraculously saving her own life in exchange for his, which was, of course, a dangerous thing. She herself didn't really understand why she had managed to escape from Akatsuki's clutches alive. Or rather, she did, but that didn't make it any easier. Sakura wasn't stupid, she knew perfectly well that no one would believe that Itachi Uchiha, a rank S missing nin, even if indirectly, had sacrificed himself for some kunoichi from the Leaf Village. No, what kind of childish babble was this? They would definitely hand her over to Ibiki Marino right away. Haruno suddenly distinctly heard the rustling of fabric on a smooth surface. Fifth moved closer. "I said that there would be no questions for now. Because that's not why I came. You're at the limit of your powers, Sakura. And you've known about it for a long time, I suppose? But now we can't waste time." The teacher's colorless tone made her whole body go cold. She continued to speak, as if looking through the girl. "While we were restoring your chakra, we managed to find this crap. A new virus," Fifth said slowly and almost weightlessly ran her hand over her student's sweaty forehead. Sakura closed her eyes from such an unexpected gesture from her mentor. For a moment, it even seemed to her that with this fleeting touch all the pain evaporated. But it only seemed that way. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say next. We can't drag it out. We found a way to rid the body of the virus. Haruno felt like she was no longer grasping the meaning of the words Fifth had spoken. Was it possible? Was there a chance? Was there really? Had Haruno really made a mistake in her independent research? The woman crossed her arms over her chest, looking intently into the eyes of her student. Haruno had no intention of looking away. She just exhaled loudly and continued to look expectantly. It seemed she had not heard the most important thing yet. After all, it couldn't be that simple. "This is the first time we've encountered something like this." The woman glanced sideways at Sakura. "And I can't say with 100% certainty that the outcome will be successful. But I don't see any other way out." "What are you talking about, Tsunade-sama?" Sakura asked impatiently, while managing to maintain a calm tone. "The virus penetrates and destroys the chakra channels. And the only way out is to pump all the chakra out of the human body. Deprive the source of the infection. Do you understand what this means, Sakura?" Sakura, of course, understood everything. She understood perfectly well that her chances were minimal, even to simply survive. And to remain without chakra forever? Is that even acceptable for her? Wouldn't it be better? Haruno remained silent, lost in her dark thoughts. Yes, she believed Tsunade-sama. She believed that she would not have another chance to stay alive. She knew that she had to decide now. And this made making a choice only more scary. Sakura said hoarsely, surprised by her own voice. Her throat had been dry for a long time, but the kunoichi understood that no one would give her water now. For her own good. I'm taking a risk anyway. Yes, the woman said under her breath, not hiding her main doubts. We don't know if we can save your life at all. And as the one responsible for the operation, I can't promise anything. You must understand that. Haruno nodded weakly. She couldn't decide anything here. I agree, the girl whispered in a voice that wasn't her own, finding her mentor's warm hand by touch, and she squeezed it with a feeling of unshakable determination. For the first time during the entire difficult conversation, undisguised sympathy and guilt flashed across Fifth's face. She should have figured it out earlier. When Haruno had come to her for advice about this very thing. How could she not have suspected anything then? Okay, Senju said slowly, her invisible gaze running over Haruno's pale face. That's exactly the answer I wanted to hear from you. Sakura only smiled faintly as the meaning of what had just been said sank in. Tsunade-sama didn't need her consent. The mentor had decided everything herself. Sakura had nothing left to lose. The risk of dying? Ridiculous. If she didn't try this experimental operation, she would die anyway. Quietly. Without risk. 100%. Tsunade-sama, the green eyes flashed unnaturally, looking at the mentor. The woman already knew what she would say. If, Sakura's voice trembled. She fell silent for a moment, as if collecting her thoughts. And then an innocent, childish smile flashed across the pink-haired girl's face. Yes, for some reason, right now she really wanted to smile. Sincerely, without her usual falseness, which the omnipresent Sai loved to notice. If nothing works out, tell my parents, Naruto. Sakura fell silent again, looking at the fifth with a guilty smile. The name of the Jinchuriki made Tsunade press her lips into a thin line. She still remembered that empty look, full of undisguised pain, that Uzumaki gave her on the day he received the news of Jiraiya's death. He had already lost enough close people. He had enough strength to forgive Tsunade for the death of his teacher. But if, due to the fifth's fault, he loses a person dear to the Jinchuriki's heart again, Naruto will not forgive. He will not understand. He will hate it. And Tsunade Senju herself will never forgive herself for this. Sakura closed her heavy eyelids. The fifth was silent, tensely inhaling the smell of the disgusting medicines. The pink-haired girl had never been particularly perceptive. But now she literally felt what was happening in her mentor's soul. Tsunade Senju was once again going to take the blame for the death of a completely unknown person. Something in her chest ached disgustingly. Sakura freed her hand from the woman's palm, still not opening her eyes. Please tell them that there was no chance. Please, Tsunade-sama. Otherwise they won't understand. Tsunade didn't answer. Haruno could only hear heavy breathing. You speak as if this is your last request, Haruno. Senju sharply pronounced each word somewhere above the girl's head, getting up from the hospital bed. No. I still have to answer all your questions. A weak smile distorted Sakura's face as she looked resolutely at her mentor. The woman couldn't help but smile softly in response. Yes, Sakura. The next moment the door closed silently, and Sakura closed her eyes with some strange relief, immersed in her completely incoherent thoughts. She was glad. Glad that she managed to talk to Tsunade-sama. Without explaining anything. Without remembering the death of Uchiha Itachi. Without thinking that the missing Nin would also have had a chance to escape. All this didn't matter now. Sakura had already stepped one foot into the abyss when she first met this man that night in her office. Now she was flying into the abyss herself, not trying to climb up. To go back. Maybe, even tomorrow she will meet him. With the apostate who has long since refused to look at the clear, free sky stretching over his personal gaping abyss. Equals time waits for no one equals. Commentary on time waits for no one. I know that I have lost all conscience, testing the patience of readers, if there are any left, of course. Forgive me for such a long absence. Other works have completely captured my thoughts, undeservedly depriving this one of attention. But I think I've gotten over this quirk. P.S. and yes, I hope I didn't go overboard with the OOC in this chapter. He is completely paralyzed and poses no threat, Orochimaru-sama. In the spacious room, illuminated only by the dim light of a crackling lamp, two silhouettes were clearly visible. A tall, long-haired man with an unnaturally pale, elongated face licked his lips predatorily, having apparently heard good news about the condition of one of his most valuable patients. The Uchiha's body finally belonged to him. Even if, not in the form in which the great Sannin expected to receive it. But that was not so important now. Who would have thought that such luck would come his way? Who would have thought that Obito Uchiha would actually agree to act in alliance with the snake Sannin? Kabuto, you may go free. I will call you, Orochimaru said in a hoarse voice, making a sign with his hand to his faithful comrade. From now on he will do everything himself. Granny, where is she? Naruto Uzumaki burst into the hospital's rest room with a noise, as if onto a battlefield. With a burning gaze clouded by insomnia, he quickly found his victim of endless interrogations. The fifth knitted her brows in oppressive silence. The Jinchuriki clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. What's wrong with Sakura-chan? The blonde repeated his question in a voice that was not his own, aloof, looking straight into Tsunade Senju's eyes. The woman withstood the burning gaze of his blue eyes with cold calm and, without thinking much, she resolutely grabbed Uzumaki by the hand. Tsunade Senju had already understood that Naruto could no longer be kept in the dark. Even for the good of her student. Sakura's close friend, the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, was now ready to kill. And not only with his heavy, devastated gaze. Let's go, the woman said, dragging the guy along with her. But don't even think about opening your mouth again, this is a hospital, not a place of entertainment. Naruto, surprisingly, obediently, without further ado, obeyed and releasing his hand from the iron grip of the fifth, he himself trudged after her along the hospital corridors, not lagging behind a single step and completely ignoring the frightened faces of the patients and the sympathetic looks of the doctors. After a few minutes, they finally reached the office the fifth needed. She had long needed to talk to Naruto alone. There was no need for extra people here. Having entered, the woman went further, to the desk, and leaning on its edge, looked intently at Uzumaki. I thought you were going to take me to Sakura-chan, Granny. You can't go to her now, how many times do I have to tell you? The woman said in a harsh tone that cut off any arguments, but then added a moment later. She is in extremely serious condition now and there is nothing you can do to help her. Naruto lowered his head, staring blankly at the floor. But Tsunade couldn't help but notice how the jaw muscles on the Jinchuriki's pale face began to twitch. He was literally torn apart by the feeling of his own helplessness and unquenchable fear. The joy of him and Kiba being the first to find Sakura-chan, unconscious but alive and unharmed, was now clearly obscured by a veil of devastating uncertainty. And the dull anticipation was simply starting to drive him crazy. 2 days have already passed. And for 2 days now he hasn't been allowed to see Sakura-chan. If Kakashi-sensei hadn't come to his senses as always, and showed up just in time, he would have destroyed this hospital to hell. She is his close friend, after all. So doesn't he have the right to know what's wrong with his Sakura-chan? Meanwhile, lousy thoughts continued to creep into the blonde's head. One darker than the other. Will she live? Uzumaki said almost with his lips and raised his unseeing gaze to the fifth. This question had been tormenting him for a long time, not letting him forget, forcing him to watch at the hospital doors day